Young little Newbert doesn't know anything about game development, but wants to make his favorite games on the Roblox platform. He reads up on the Roblox documentation to learn how to make a game until he hits a roadblock trying to figure out what the heck a script is and how a game comes together. And as a result of that, he quits on day one and probably doesn't have a computer anymore after destroying it out of frustration, and now he can't pursue making the games he's always wanted to make. Oh, Newbert, becoming a Roblox game developer doesn't happen overnight. You'll especially have to put in the time, put in the effort, and face the struggles head on when you don't understand a concept, especially in the world of scripting and programming. In the beginning, it can be very difficult and demotivating to continuously learn how to become a better Roblox scripter when you keep getting faced with error messages and unintended effects in your game. It's a real struggle most beginners face when learning how to script on Roblox, which is why I want to make this playlist to help you reach your goals of making the games that you want to create on Roblox. My name is Braldev, and I will be teaching you everything you need to know to become a great Roblox scripter. I've been scripting on Roblox for about 7 to 8 years, and during this time, I've made countless projects that just weren't successful. But one thing that kept me going throughout all these years was the desire to learn more and actually have an interest in the things I was learning. Even if I faced challenges when learning new things, especially during times when I was demotivated. And I hope you can adopt this secret strategy to go through this journey of becoming a Roblox game developer. As of recording this video, I have 2 playlists ready for you to watch once you finish this beginner's guide: the advanced scripting tutorial guide and the GUI tutorial guide. It's quite a scary journey to go through all these episodes considering how many there are now, but like I mentioned, becoming a Roblox game developer isn't easy. And so I would like to make the journey easier for you by having everything you need to know in these playlists, ranging from the very basics to the advanced concepts, and accelerate you to become a pro Roblox scripter and game developer in 2024. And with that being said, let's now go ahead and start making games on Roblox. Alright, so what you see here is the homepage of the software called Roblox Studio. Now, this is the software we're going to be using to create our Roblox games so that we can upload them to the Roblox website and so players can actually play your game that's uploaded to Roblox. I'll leave a link to this in the description if you want to download Roblox Studio so that you can log in with your account and then you can be greeted with this same exact home screen just like you're seeing in this video. Now, before we do anything, I encourage you to basically follow exactly what I do step by step so that you can kind of get a feel for how to use Roblox Studio and you're experiencing what I'm teaching you while you follow through with these videos, because just watching me go through these tutorial videos isn't going to be enough to help you learn. So that's why I encourage you to literally do exactly what I do as you watch these videos, to follow along and learn from doing it yourself as well. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, once we are here inside of this home screen, Roblox has a bunch of templates that we can choose from as a starter place to start making our Roblox games. For the purpose of this tutorial guide, we're going to use this base plate template right here. I'm just going to click on this, and then what's going to happen is Roblox is going to load in this template that we just selected, and now we are thrown into this world that we can now mess around with to create our Roblox game and upload it onto the platform. Now, there are a couple of things here that I want to introduce to you so that you get a feel for how Roblox Studio works, because that's our goal for this first episode. It's to familiarize ourselves with using Roblox Studio and some of the things that they have to offer. And the first thing I want to show you is being able to navigate around this 3D world that you see right here that represents our Roblox game. So I want you to imagine you're playing Roblox on PC. The controls you'd probably use are W, A, S, and D for the keys, and also the mouse as well. So it kind of works the same way here as well. So if we hold W, that's going to move our camera forward. If we hold S, that's going to move our camera backwards. If we hold A, that's going to go left, and then D, that's going to go right. And if we want to move the camera specifically, then what we can do is hold the right mouse button and then drag our mouse around the world so that we can change our camera to face a certain direction. And we can combine these movements together so that we're able to move around Studio as we so desire to. Some other things we can do is hold Q to make our camera go down, and then hold E to make our camera go up, and we can even use the scrolling wheel to scroll outward and also scroll inward as well. So these are some basic movement controls that I will introduce to you for this episode, and maybe go through some more later down the line, but that's like the basics of being able to move around inside of Roblox Studio. So now there are some windows that I want to show you that are going to be very important for the entirety of this tutorial guide. The first one is this Roblox Studio ribbon up here that basically shows all of the resources and services that they have provided to us so that we can use them for our Roblox game. So right now we're in the home category. So if we select a different tab like model, then it's going to show us a bunch of different things here that we can use. And if we go to avatar, it's going to show us some different stuff, test, view, plugins, and all of these other sorts of things that are going to be very helpful for us. Now, another window that's extremely important to understand is what's called the Explorer, as you can see right here on the right side. You can see that there's all of these different folders inside of here with different names, and I'm going to try and give a brief explanation as to what this all means. Well, to basically summarize what the Explorer is, it's basically a directory full of folders that have its own specific purposes where you combine all of them together to make up one Roblox game. So every single Roblox game you can think of basically has this structure right here with all of these different folders with different purposes that you will need to learn how to use as a Roblox game developer. So one of the ones, as an example, is called Workspace. Workspace is what basically shows us the entire 3D world, and this is how we're able to render things inside of this game screen. It's when we put objects inside of this workspace folder. Now, if we were to open up this workspace folder, so if we click on this arrow that's to the left of it, then we can see that there's actually stuff contained within this workspace folder. So we have the camera, terrain, spawn location, base plate, and things like that. And if we open these up, we can see that there's other stuff in here contained within the thing that's within the workspace. So you can kind of see that there's this hierarchy structure going on with this workspace. And it's very important to understand the structure when you're working with finding stuff within your game. And so it's a really good practice to understand how this structure works. Now, if I were to select one of these objects, like let's say the workspace, we can see that down here, it showed a bunch of things in this other window called properties. Now, this is the next window that is going to be extremely important to understand. So basically what this window does is it shows all of the properties, the attributes, the settings or configurations, whatever you want to describe it as, for the object that we selected. So what we selected is this workspace object, and there's all these properties here that are associated with that object that we can actually change ourselves. And if we select a different object, like let's say the spawn location, it's going to show different properties for this spawn location object. And we can actually change it and see the change in real time inside of our game. So if we were to, let's say, change the color, let's say, so if I click on the color, then it's going to show us this color wheel right here that we can just pick whichever color we want. So if I were to, let's say, pick this color and I hit OK, then it's going to change the color in real time, and we can actually see this change inside of Roblox Studio. So that's kind of a cool thing to know about when it comes to understanding the properties window and also the Explorer window and how both of them work together to basically have stuff inside of our workspace. And now the next thing I want to demonstrate is being able to add parts inside of the game. So I'm actually going to deselect the spawn location by simply selecting anywhere inside of this world, just like that. And what I'm going to do is go on the top ribbon and click on this part button that's inside of the insert category. So I'm going to click this, and as you can see, Roblox has inserted a part for us to use. And what I can do is take this part, hold left click, and drag it wherever I want to put it inside of the workspace. Now, there are other tools that I want to introduce to you that you might find extremely helpful. So we're able to select this and move it around, and this is what's called the select tool, as you can see up here on the screen. The next tool is called move. So if we select this, then we can see these arrows that are surrounding this part. So if we hold this blue arrow and then move it this way, then it's going to move the part in this specific direction. And we can do the same thing for the red arrow, and we can do the same thing for the green arrow as well. Another thing we can do is change the size of this part by clicking on this scale tool. So if we scale this part this way, then it's going to move it in this direction. And the last tool is the rotate tool. So if we select this, then we can see that this basically resembles a bunch of circles. We select whichever circle we want, and then we move it in that direction specifically. So I'm kind of just moving this part around a little bit, and that is basically how you use the rotate part. Now, once again, I want to deselect this, so I'm just going to click elsewhere like this. And now we have a part that basically just does absolutely nothing. But what I wanted to get at here was getting the feel and practice for moving around Roblox Studio and also adding parts into the game. So that's basically the introduction to using Roblox Studio. Now, at the end of every single video for this playlist, what I want to do is give you a learning objective or a challenge to assess what you learned inside of each video. Now, for this learning objective, what I want you to do is basically just continue to experiment with Roblox Studio, either by moving around inside of the workspace or by adding more parts like this. So I'm actually going to go up here and I'm going to insert another part, and we can do whatever we want with it by, I don't know, changing the brick color, changing the size if we select the scale tool, just like this, and things like that. You can even navigate through more settings over here, and that's another great way of familiarizing yourself with Roblox Studio. And once you are done with this learning objective, I want you to go down to the comments of this video and describe what you did for this learning objective so that other people who watch this tutorial can see what other people have been doing. And I think it would just be a really great way to show what everybody else is doing for these challenges. Now, before we end off this video, there's one final thing I forgot to mention, and that is the importance of saving your work so that you don't lose your progress. So what we can do is go on the top left here in File, and we're going to click Save to File As, and it's going to show up our file directory right here. And you could just pick wherever you want to save this Roblox Studio place in. So I'm just going to pick this place. You can even rename it to whatever you want to. I'm just going to say Beginner Scripting Guide to the 2024, just like that. And I'm going to hit enter, and there we go. Now our place is saved. And I encourage you to save your game very frequently so that you don't lose progress as you go through this tutorial guide. So that's pretty much going to be it for this episode, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about printing. So in the last episode, we covered the basics of navigating around Roblox Studio and what Roblox Studio has to offer for us that's going to be important for this entire tutorial guide. So for things like moving around inside of Roblox Studio, also showing you the services that Roblox has to offer for us, the Explorer panel, and also the Properties panel that we're going to be using throughout this entire tutorial guide. Now that we have that understanding, for the rest of this tutorial guide, I'm going to be introducing to you concepts relating to scripting. Now, to basically explain what scripting is, it's an aspect of game development that allows you to add functionality to your games that you're creating on Roblox. So the other aspects of game development are things like building, like we just did right here. Maybe even things like modeling and also UI designing and all of these other sorts of things. Scripting is a component of game development that allows you to add functionality to your game. An example I can think of this is this spawn location right here. So making the spawn location itself requires building, but actually making it functional requires scripting. So if my character were to join into the game, then we need to tell Roblox that we need to spawn on this spawn location. And if our character dies, then we need to respawn back onto this spawn location. So that is what adds functionality to the spawn location rather than it just being some random part inside of the game. So that requires scripting to be able to essentially tell Roblox that we want this spawn location to function the way it is because of it. And we add functionality through scripts. Now, to explain what a script is, it's basically a document or a piece of paper that has a list of instructions or commands that basically tells Roblox to execute these commands when we join into the game or when a specific thing happens inside of the game. And so when we write these scripts, it's very important for us to write it in a very specific way so that Roblox can read these commands and they can interpret it so that they can understand it, finally execute them inside of our game. Because this is one of the biggest things new developers get confused with, and that is being able to get the syntax down, like understanding the rules and guidelines when it comes to writing these commands, because they fall under a programming language called Lua or Lua U, for Roblox. And so when we understand this language, then we're able to write commands effectively and tell Roblox to execute certain commands within our scripts. So let's actually create our first script, and we're going to be adding this inside of the Explorer. And there's two places that are popular for scripts. The first one is the workspace, and the second one is the server script service. But for this episode, we're going to add a script inside of workspace. And there's a couple of ways you can add objects inside of a folder. One way is to hit this plus sign that's next to workspace. So I'm going to click on this, and there should be a list full of all of these objects that we can put inside of this folder. So what I'm going to do is say script inside of the search bar, and there's 3 scripts. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to be using the normal script. So I'm just going to click on this. And now we have inserted a script inside of our workspace. And you might have also noticed that our screen has changed to be inside of this script editor. And we can revert back to the game if we want to by hitting down this tab right here. So we are now back into the normal game. And if we want to go back into the script, then we just simply click on the script so that we can pull up the script editor again. And when we open up the script for the first time, Roblox is going to add a default command here that simply just says print hello world. Now, it might be a little hard to read for you, so what I want you to do is hit Control and then move the mouse scroll wheel inward so that you can zoom in. But I'm already zoomed in pretty well, so if you need to do that, then you can do that very quickly. So for this first scripting episode, what I'm going to show you how to do is write these print statements. Now, what is a print statement? A print statement is basically a command that allows us to write a message to an output window so that we can see it when we run the game. Now, in order to know where this output window is, what we need to do is go back into the game, hit on the view tab, and we're going to click on this button that says output. So if we click on this, then we can see this window down here that shows our print statements and also our logs as well. That's the whole point of the output window. It's so that we can see whatever we put inside of here show up down here when we join into the game. So if we go into the game, we can actually test this out for ourselves. The way we do that is by hitting on this test tab up here, and then we click on this button that says play. So if we click on this, then what's going to happen is, first of all, our character actually loads into the game, and we can play this game normally as if this was a Roblox game. But also down here, we can see in the output, it says hello world, which was our message. And we can actually click on the script that executed this command, and it's going to show us the script and also the line of where our print message executed. So this print statement is basically a print command that tells Roblox that we want to print this message down here inside of this output so that we can see it for ourselves. And we can write our own print statements as well, rather than having Roblox's default print message right over here. So what we can do is actually delete this print statement so that we can write our own print statement. So what I'm going to do is hold down the backspace so that it basically deletes all the lines of code that was over here. So we are on line number 1, and now let's add in our first print statement. Now, one quick thing I want to mention is that when we are writing our scripts, it's very case sensitive. And what that means is you have to be very specific with how you write stuff inside of the script. So some things can be uppercase, some things can be lowercase, and it's very important that we understand when it is uppercase and when it's lowercase. So now let's write our print statement. We're simply going to say in all lowercase, we're going to say print, P-R-I-N-T. And then what we're going to do is type the open parentheses. So we're going to press Shift 9, and then we're also going to put in the double quotations. So we're going to say Shift apostrophe. And so now we can write whatever message we want inside of these quotations. So we can say something as simple as hello, just like this with an exclamation mark. And there we go. This is our very first print statement that we have going on right over here. We can test this by going into the game and hitting play. So as we can see in the output, it indeed printed our message with hello. Now, I forgot to mention really quickly that when we're playing the game inside of Roblox Studio, like we hit play, in order for us to stop playtesting, we go up here and then just simply hit the stop button. I forgot to mention this because I do it out of instinct, so I apologize about that. So what we're going to do is hit stop, and now we are back into Roblox Studio. So now let's go back to our script, and we can actually add more print statements on top of this print statement. So what we're going to do is drop a line by hitting enter, and as you can see, we are now on line number 2. So we can write our print statement just like we did the first time by saying print, open parentheses, and then we're going to say double quotations. And we can continue what we were saying before by saying, how are you doing? Question mark, just like this. So now we have 2 print statements. If we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is 2 of our print statements instead of just 1. So it's going to start with hello, and then it's going to say, how are you doing? So if we hit stop and then we go into the script, we can continue this chain of print statements if we want to. We can go and hit enter, and then we can write another print statement by saying print, open parentheses, double quotations, and then I can say, I'm doing very well. exclamation mark. So now we have 3 print statements, and you can continue going down the script editor and just keep adding more and more print statements if you want to do that. Because you can make this as long as you want to. Like you have the power to make as many print statements as you want. Like if we go back into the game and hit play, then as you can see in the output, it's going to display the 3 print messages that we just created. Now, you don't have to worry about the syntax for right now. That's going to be explained in a future episode. But what I want you to do is I literally want you to type exactly what I'm typing here so that you get the feel for knowing how to implement this stuff inside of Roblox Studio, and so that you're getting the experience alongside me as we go through these scripting episodes. So that's basically going to be it for this episode. What I want you to do for today's learning objective is to continue this story of these 3 print statements. You could just continue down here by writing another print statement, or if you want, you can delete all of these print statements and write your own story or whatever it is you want to create. So you can just delete the entire thing and then you can start back from square one if you want to. It's really up to you with what you want to do. Now, after you do this, what I encourage you to do is take your print statements, go down to the comment section of this video, and then paste it so that other viewers can see your poem or your message or whatever it is that you're comfortable sharing to everybody else, because I just think it would be very fun to see what everybody's doing for these challenges. So go ahead and do that once you finish with this learning objective. And one more thing before we end off this video. If you get stuck at any point throughout this tutorial guide, I have a Discord server which you can go into to ask questions and get help for your scripts if you want through the link in the description. So if you're interested, then feel free to join my Discord server to get help while you go through this tutorial guide. So that's pretty much going to be it for this tutorial guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about data types. So in the last episode, we were able to create a script for the first time and also add some stuff inside of our script inside of this script editor. But now that we've gotten that taken care of, I want to introduce to you a very fundamental concept in scripting that is basically going to be part of our scripting arsenal, I guess if you want to call it, that we're going to be using throughout the entirety of this tutorial guide, and that is what's called data types. So I want you to imagine this. If we were to, let's say, change some properties inside of one of these parts that I created in the first episode, so I'm going to select this part right here. If we go on the right side, we can see it's highlighted in the Explorer, and it's also showing the properties for this part in the properties window. When we're looking at these properties that are on the left side here, these are the names of the properties that we can modify. And what's shown on the right side is the value of these properties. So when we're working with changing these values, there can be different data types depending on what the property is. So for example, this brick color takes in a color value. So if I select this, and if I were to change the color of this to something different, we're essentially changing the brick color value or the brick color data type for this property. And there's other data types here like cast shadow that has a check mark that shows whether this property is turned on or if this property is turned off. If I click on it, then it's going to be turned off. And there's other ones like transparency, which is a number data type. So if I were to select this, then we can use the slider to basically move this value from 0 to 1 as the max for this property. And if we were to make it go backwards this way, then it's going to make it go back to 0. So as you saw with this transparency property, it slowly makes it more and more invisible as we make it go further down the line. But if we make it go back down here to 0, then we can see this part fully opaque. So now that we understand that, these properties can have multitudes of different data types that we can use when we're changing properties. But not only that, it also applies to our scripts that we're going to be writing inside of Roblox Studio to use different data types. And if every single property was restricted to just one data type, then we simply just wouldn't have a game, because if every single one of these properties were the same data type, then it would give us a lot of restrictions to what we can change and what we cannot change, which is why it's important to understand these different data types and when to use certain data types. So now that we understand that, let's go back to our scripts that we created in the last episode. So what I'm going to do is go to the Explorer and then double click on our script. So now that we're here inside of the script, what I'm going to do is drop 2 lines by hitting enter twice. And now I'm going to introduce to you three basic data types that we're gonna have to know for the rest of this tutorial guide. And the first one is called a Boolean value. So now that we're here inside of the script, what I'm going to do is drop 2 lines. So I'm going to hit the enter key twice, and I'm going to make another print statement. So I'm going to write in all lowercase, print just like this, and then have the open parentheses right over here. Now, I'm not going to add in the double quotations just yet, and I'm going to tell you why a little bit later. So right now, we just have the open parentheses, and what we're going to put inside of here is the first data type that I want you to understand, and that is a Boolean. Now, a Boolean is basically a data type that gives one value or the other. So with this data type, there's only 2 possible values that can come out of this data type, which is either true or either false. And one really big example I can give you for this is a check mark when we're changing a property of a specific part. So if I were to select this, and we have the property known as cast shadow, this is a check mark that can either only be 1 or 2 values. It can either be turned on, like it can be true, but if we select it, then it can be false or it's off. So that's essentially what the Boolean data type is, and we can show this by typing in all lowercase true. And we can see that Roblox highlighted this in yellow to indicate that this is a Boolean value. And we can do the same thing with the other value. So if we drop a line and then write print, open parentheses, and we write false, then these are Boolean values. So it can either be true or it can either be false. And this is going to be very important later down the line when we're going to be using Boolean values inside of our scripts. So that's the first data type. But the next one I'm going to introduce to you is a number. So I'm going to drop 2 lines down here, write another print statement, have the open parentheses, and I don't think I need to explain what a number is. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But in terms of the size of the number we can use, it kind of is limitless. Unless your Roblox game literally does crash because of how big these numbers can get, you can basically put down a number that's super small, or you can put down a number that's super big. So in this example, what I'm going to do is put down a number of, let's say, 100, just like this. Then as you can see, this number is yellow, but it's not in bold. So that's how you know that this is a number. Now, what I can do is drop another line, make another print statement, with the open parentheses, and we can have a negative value as well, indicated by a dash symbol before we add a number to it. So if we add 100, then this is negative 100, while this is positive 100. And both of these are whole numbers. Another thing we can do is have decimal numbers. So if I were to drop a line down here, make another print statement, then what we can put down here is a decimal number indicated by a dot or a period. So what I'm going to say is 100 dot, and then some other number after this, like 50, it's going to be 100.50, which is going to be our decimal number. And so these are some of the ways we can create numbers inside of our scripts that's going to be very important later down the line. And finally, I'm going to introduce to you the last data type. So I'm going to write a print statement down here. So I'm going to say in all lowercase, print, and then inside of here, I'm going to show you what the last data type is, and that's called a string. Now, we've actually worked with strings in the past, conveniently in the last episode. It's indicated by this up here in double quotations. Now, a string is basically it's a list of characters or words or sentences or however you want to describe it, all contained inside of one data type, which has 2 quotations. So it's going to have one at the beginning and then one at the end. So this basically shows us that this is a string that comprises of a sentence full of characters and words and all these other sorts of things. So we can create another string down here by having double quotations like this, and then we can write down whatever it is we want inside of these strings. So we can say, this is a string, just like this. Now, what's interesting about strings is that we can actually represent strings with either double quotations, or we can even have single quotations as well, and they will both be the string data type. So if I were to drop a line down here, make a print statement, open and close parentheses, we can actually put in single quotations just like this, and we can write the same thing. This is a string, period. So this is the string data type right here that we've actually used in the last episode. We just didn't confirm that this is a string data type now that I was able to introduce to you what data types are inside of this episode. So that's the basics of understanding data types, and this is going to be very helpful for us later down the line as we continue to build up our skills in scripting. So for today's learning objective, what I want you to do is experiment more with these data types by either printing more true statements or printing false statements, or even printing more numbers. You can experiment with these numbers because there's a lot you can do with numbers. There's only so many numbers you can print. And I also want you to experiment more with strings if you haven't already. And even with single quotations as well. So once you do that, go down to the comments and paste whatever you feel comfortable sharing so that other people can see what you've been doing in these learning objective challenges. So with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about data types. So again, this is the next coding fundamental concept that we need to know for scripting to become a better scripter. Now what we're going to do for this episode is actually create a new script so that we can organize our scripts when we go further down the line with this tutorial guide. Because if we were to go back to the scripts that we've been making throughout this tutorial, it can get very lengthy very fast if we used the same script throughout the entire tutorial guide. So what I'm actually going to do is go back to our game, and I'm going to go to the right side of the workspace, and I'm going to go down to this property here that says enabled. So I'm actually going to uncheck this property so that when the game runs, so if I hit play, then whatever we put inside of the script isn't going to run in the output because it's now disabled, so the script isn't going to fire when we join into the game. And so that is a property that you might find to be useful if you were to have scripts that you don't want to execute when the game runs inside of Studio or just in the game in general. So now what I'm going to do is hit stop, and now we want to create a new script for this episode. And to make this more organized, what I'm going to do is actually rename the script on the right side here. So I'm going to right click on the script, and I'm going to hit this button that says rename, and it's going to highlight the name right here. So what we can do is basically just delete this, and we can insert a new name here. So I'm going to rename this to printing data types, just like this, and I'm going to hit enter. It doesn't matter what you call it, but I'm just going to call it printing data types. And so now we can create a new script. So I'm going to click on the plus sign next to workspace, and I'm going to search up script just like this, and I'm going to insert a regular script just like this. So I'm also going to click on the script, right click it, and I'm going to rename this one to the name of this episode, which is going to be variables. So now that we have that taken care of, I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see it better. And I'm also going to X out of our previous script inside of the script editor like this. And now we should be at the normal game and also have the variables tab right up here. So now that we have this taken care of, let me introduce to you what a variable is. So a variable is basically a reference to another value. Now that's the simplest explanation I can give. So when we have a name that references a value, then we can use that name that we created that basically acts as the value that we're referencing with the name that we created. Now, it may seem kind of confusing to you at first, but I want to write this inside of our script so that I can help you understand this concept better. So what I'm going to do is select this print statement, and I'm going to delete it since we don't need it. Now, what I want you to do is copy exactly what I typed because it may be confusing to you at first. So what I want you to do in all lowercase is type in local. And then what we're going to put here is a random variable name, and it doesn't matter what we call this variable name. So I'm just going to say my variable like this, and I'm going to put in an equal sign, and I'm going to set this equal to a random data type value that we worked with in the last episode. So I'm just going to say that this is 100. Now, looking at this, you might be confused, like what does this all mean? Well, to basically understand what is happening here, We don't need to worry about what this local variable is right now. I'm going to explain this in a future episode. But basically what we have going on here is three components that make up this variable. So what's going on over here is this is a name that I came up with, and this variable name can be whatever name we want the variable to be. As long as we can reference it later inside of the script, then it doesn't matter what we call this. And then we have an equal sign here that basically says that we've now created a new variable that is set equal to whatever value is on the right side here, which is going to be 100. So what's interesting about this is if we drop a line down here and we make a print statement, so we write down print and then have the open parentheses, and we put down our new variable name that we created. So we say my variable like this, then you might expect in the output to print my variable or something similar to that. But no, you might actually be surprised. If we go into the game, hit test and hit play, then what we should see in the output is actually the number 100. So if I click on this and refer back to our script that we created, it's printing out my variable. But why did it print 100? It printed 100 because my variable is simply a reference to the number 100 as we specify here when we created this variable. And so this is what I'm talking about when we're having a variable refer to a different data type value like this. And this is really powerful to know. And it's going to be one of the most important concepts to understand when we do create variables that reference other values. Now, why do we need to know this? Well, if we were to hit stop so that we're out of playtest mode, and if I were to go back into the script, I want you to imagine that we have a scenario that if I were to make a print statement like this and then print 5, drop a line down here, and if I were to print 5 again just like this and drop a line, and if I were to print 5 once again just like this, then it's going to be kind of repetitive. And what if we wanted to change all of these values? Then we would have to go back and change the value for each single one of these numbers. But instead, what if we had an easier way to do this? And that would simply just be replacing this data type with a variable that is referencing a value. So all we need to do is change this value, and it's going to change everything else that is going to be inside of this print statement that uses the variable that we just created. So if I were to basically copy this code right here, so if I were to select this and then right click, hit copy, and then if I were to drop a line down here and I were to right click on this and then hit paste, then it's going to paste the same line that we just had that we copied. And I'm going to do the same thing down here by hitting enter and then hitting paste just like this. So I'm also going to delete these lines right here so that it's not going to get in the way of our script. So when we have our variable be like this, we go into the game, hit play, then what we should see in the output is 100 being printed 3 different times because it's using the same variable that's referencing this data type of 100. If we hit stop and we go back into our script and then change this one value to, let's say, 50, then we go back into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is 50 being printed every single time. We only had to change this one value to affect all 3 of these print statements rather than having to change each individual print statement to change that one value. That's a very basic way of how I can explain how variables work inside Studio, and this is going to be very important for us to understand later down the line. Now, there's a certain naming convention that I would like you to use, and that's basically how we write these variables. So usually what I do is what's called camel case, and so I would basically have the first letter of the first word be in lowercase, and then have the first letter of every other word be in uppercase, while the rest of it is just in lowercase. So if I were to extend this even further, I could say my variable is 50, just like this. This is how we would create the variable. Now, as you can see down here, these print statements are throwing an error saying unknown global my variable. And that's because we no longer have a variable that we created called my variable is 50. So what we need to do is update these variables to say my variable is 50. And as you can see, Roblox is recommending us to use this variable right here. So if we want to complete this, rather than type the whole thing out, we can just type in tab, and Roblox is going to add this in for us. And we can do the same thing here as well. So if we select this and say is 50, then we can just hit tab and Roblox is going to correct it for us. So is 50, and then just like that, we have our variable taken care of. So if we hit play, then we can still see that the output is printing the value 50 after referencing our variable, my variable is 50. So that's the basics of using variables inside of your scripts. What I want you to do for today's learning objective is to create more variables and set them equal to different data types. So it doesn't have to just be numbers. It can also be booleans and it can also be strings. So I want you to have these references down and be able to print them inside of the output right here and be able to make print statements to print them effectively so we can show them inside of the output. So I want you to try and do that for this learning objective. And once you do, I want you to go down to the comment section and show what you did for this challenge, since I do look at all my comments for my videos. So it would be very nice to see what you're doing for this episode as we go through this tutorial guide. So that's pretty much going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is BrawlDev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about properties. So as a reminder, within the past few episodes, we've been able to change properties of objects within the game with this properties window right here on the right side. So if we were to select one of these parts that we have over here, let's say this one, then it's going to be highlighted on the workspace, and it's also going to show the properties window down here that's going to show all the properties, configurations, and attributes that we can change for this part so that the changes are reflected inside of the game so we can see it for ourselves. For example, if we change the brick color, so if I select this and I pick a random color from this color wheel right here, let's say yellow, then it's going to reflect those changes onto the game, and it's also going to change the value of this property inside of the properties window. So this is something we can do while we are in Studio using this properties panel. But what if I told you we can actually change these properties inside of a script while the game is running? So when we're changing these properties, we can only do them while we are inside of Studio before the game is actually running. But if we're doing this inside of a script, we can change these properties whenever we want to while the game is running. So that's the power of being able to use scripts to change properties within them while the game is running. So now that we understand that, well, actually, first of all, what I'm going to do is undo this change for the brick color that I did. And I'm just going to hit Control Z. So that's basically going to undo my last previous change. And this is a shortcut I use a lot. If you also prefer to, you can go on the top left and click these arrows that redoes your action and also undoes your action. So that's just a little quick thing I wanted to add there before we started scripting. So now let's add our own script. What we're going to do is go on the right side and we're going to click on our variables scripts that we created in the last episode, and we're going to hit disable, or we're going to uncheck the enabled property. And what we're going to do is click the plus sign next to workspace, and we're going to search up a script, and let's insert another script. Let's also rename the script. So I'm going to select this, right click and hit rename to properties, and then hit enter. Okay, so now that we have that, just like scroll in if you want to view it more clearly. And I'm just going to select everything that's inside of here and then hit backspace. So here's the first thing we need to do. We need to be able to locate a specific object within the game that we want to change its property for. This can be inside of the workspace, but it can also be inside of any of these other places within the game. But just for simplicity's sake, what we're going to be doing is essentially locating this huge part, this huge gray part that's called the base plate inside of the workspace. And we're going to change the properties of this base plate within our script. So what we need to do is actually locate this base plate within our script before we can change the properties of this base plate. And here's how we're going to do it. So I remember how I showed you how this game is basically structured in this sort of hierarchy, where we basically start with the game, and then these folders all make up one game. And then we find whatever is contained within each folder to then locate the objects that we're looking for. So The way we do this is if we go back to our script, we first need to specify the game's data model that basically makes up the entire game itself. So in all lowercase, what we're going to do is type game, and it's going to be highlighted in blue to let you know that this is the game data model. And the way we traverse or like go through this hierarchy is by separating each object with a period or a dot. And then what we're going to search up after this is the folder that we're looking for. So we're going to say workspace like this. And then if we want to locate even further, what we're going to do is put in a period. And then we're going to look for our base plate, which is inside of the workspace. So we're going to say base plate just like this. So this is how we locate objects within the game. We specify the game data model, and then we traverse through each object with a period so that we find the object that we're looking for. And then what we're going to do is get a property of base plate that we want to change. So if we were to go back into the game and select the base plate that's inside of the Explorer, we can now select a property that we want to change inside of this base plate. So for instance, let's say we want to change the transparency. What we're going to do is go back to our script, and we're going to add another period, and we're going to say transparency like this. And if we want to set this to something different, we're going to say equals, and then whatever value we want to have on the right side. So what we're going to put down here is probably a value that's not 0, so we can actually see it. Let's put it at 1. And this is basically how we change a property of an object within the game. So now if we go into the game, hit test and hit play, then what we should see within the game as soon as we join in is the base plate's transparency is now 1. So it looks very clear compared to if we were to go back into Studio, because as soon as we joined into the game, this script fired and it made the changes like we wanted to see within this base plate. So if we hit stop, then what's going to happen is we're just going to see that the base plate is back to normal again, because this change only happens if the game is running. So that is basically how we change one property of the base plate. We can change another one by doing the exact same thing we did before. So if we drop a line and then locate the base plate, so we can say game.workspace.baseplate. And if we wanted to change the material instead, let's say, what we can do is say dot material equals, and then we can, and there's a lot of materials we can choose from. If we basically go to this drop down that's over here on the right side and we hit the drop down, then there's a lot of materials we can choose from. We can select any one of these materials we want. So let's say we wanted to use brick. What we would do is in double quotations, since these are strings, or at least we can use strings to change this material, we're just going to put in double quotations, and we're going to say brick just like this. And we're also going to change the transparency to something different so that we can actually see the base plate's material. We're just going to set this equal to 0.25, so it's very easily noticeable, but not completely opaque. So if we go into the game and hit play, then we should see our new changes inside of the base plate. And as you can see, it now has a brick material, and it has a transparency of 0.25, so it's only a fourth of its transparency versus opaqueness, I guess if you want to describe it like that. So that is how you change the properties within an object in the game. Now, we can further make this more readable by adding a variable to the game's base plate. So what we can do is drop 2 lines at the beginning of the script so that we can add a reference to the base plate. So what we're going to do is say local base plate. And once again, you can name this base plate, or you can name this variable whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Equals game.workspace.baseplate, just like this. And so now what we can do is replace these references to the base plate with just base plate like this. So I'm going to select each one of these references, and I'm just going to replace it with base plate. And this should basically do the exact same thing. If we load it to the game and then look at the base plate, then yeah, the changes have been reflected to our property changes that we made inside of the script. So I'm going to hit stop. And then finally, another data type we can change is, let's say, cast shadow, since this is a Boolean type. What we can do is say baseplate.cast shadow equals false, because by default, it's set to true. Now, you can't really see the change that much inside of here with cast shadow, because it would be effective if we were to see it on the bottom, but we're not really going to be seeing the bottom of that. So there's no point in testing it, but this is another thing we can change here. So with that being said, that's basically going to be it for this episode with properties. What I want you to do for today's learning objective is to change more properties with the base plate, or you could use one of your parts that you created in previous episodes to rename the part inside of the Explorer and then make reference to that part so that you can change the properties of that part within the game. And once you do that, I want you to take your code, go down to the comment section of this video, paste it so that other people can see what you've been doing with these challenges, if you're comfortable sharing it, of course. And that is basically going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about functions. Now once again, this is going to be another very fundamental concept in scripting that you will be using a lot inside of your scripts. So with that being said, what we're going to do on the right side first is we're going to disable our properties script that we created in the last episode. So I'm going to select it and then click on disable. And what I'm going to do is hit the plus sign next to workspace, search up a script. So we're going to insert one of these and we're going to rename the script. So I'm going to right click it and rename. We're going to call this one functions, enter, just like this. And now we have our new script for our functions. So what I'm going to do is delete this. And before I introduce to you what a function is, let me present with you a scenario. So let's say I wanted to take the game's base plate and repeatedly change one of its properties, like let's say the transparency, for example. What I'm going to do is go to our script, and we're first going to make reference to this base plate like we did in the last episode. So what I'm going to do is say local, and then we're going to put in a variable name, and this can be whatever you want, but I'm just going to say my base plate equals game.workspace.baseplate like this, and I'm going to change the transparency property of the baseplate. So I'm going to say my baseplate.transparency equals 1. Now, if I wanted to copy this and paste it 2 more times, then what I'm going to do is select this line, and we can actually copy it by right-clicking and then hitting copy. Now, as a shortcut, what we can do is type in Control, like hold down Control, and then C for cat, and then we drop a line down here, and then we just paste it by holding down Control and typing V for violin, just like this, and it's going to paste it in just like that. So then we can replace this with 0.5, and we can drop one more line, hit Control V, and then we can paste this to be 0. So these are the 3 lines of code that we have over here. But what if I presented to you a scenario where we basically copied these 3 lines? So we copy this by hitting Control C, and then dropping down 2 lines by hitting Control V. Now we have 6 lines of code where we change the transparency. And if I do this again, then we have 9. And if we keep on going like this, then we're going to have a lot of transparency changes to this base plate. So we're using 3 lines of code to change the transparency of this base plate for each block that we do here. But what if I told you there's a much better way to do this and a much more efficient way to do this, and that is by using what's called a function. Now, basically what a function is it's a piece of code that basically contains multiple lines of code that executes just by calling it in one line. It may not make sense to you unless I show it to you. So what I'm going to do is repeatedly press this undo button so that we can backtrack. Now we can also hold Control Z to do the exact same thing, Z as in zebra. And now we are back here with 3 lines of code. So what I'm going to do is after we make reference to our base plate, what I'm going to do is drop 2 lines down here, and we have to be able to create our function. So the way we do that is by first specifying the keyword local. Now, once again, I will explain this in a future episode, but bear with me as we type out this function. We're going to hit space, and we're going to put in the keyword function in all lowercase so that we know that this is a function that we're creating. And then we can name this function whatever we want this to be. So we can call this, let's say, change transparency like this. And what we need to do is add in the open and close parentheses just like this. And now we're going to select the right side. So we're going to click on this and then we're going to hit enter. Now, as you can see, Roblox has automatically added in this end keyword for us. And there's like this little indentation that's going on right over here. So if we type something, then it's going to be indented a little bit so that it'll show that whatever we type inside of here is going to be inside of this change transparency function. Now, what we can do from here on out is basically take these pieces of code, these 3 lines, and I'm actually going to cut this line of code. So what I'm going to do is hit Control X so that it's saved to our clipboard. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hit Control V to paste the code inside of this function. So now our 3 lines of code is inside of this change transparency function rather than it being out here. So now this should work pretty much. If we go into the game and hit play, then we should see the change, right? Well, no, that's actually incorrect. We don't see the change to the base plate. And that's because we only created the function, but now we actually need to call this function. So what we need to do is hit stop and go back to our functions script. What we need to do is actually call this change transparency function, and we simply just need to say change transparency open and close parentheses just like this. So basically what we have going on right here, we just simply paste it down here just like this. Now, in order for us to really see this change, what we need to do is change this further because by default, the base plate's transparency already is 0. So what we can do is basically copy this line. So Control C and then Control V down here. And I'm also going to copy this line. So I'm going to hit Control C and then I'm going to hit enter and then hit Control V. So now we have these 5 lines of code right here. Let's go into the game, hit play. And now what we should see in the base plate is that it is indeed transparent after going through all of these different lines of code. So now we can basically repeatedly call the same change transparency function by going down here and then hitting change transparency just like this. And it'll basically act the same way as if we were to copy these 5 lines of code, drop 2 lines, and then do it just like this. So this is the equivalent of this over here. And this is a much better way of writing our scripts, and it's definitely going to help us with code organization and optimization for the future when we work on more complicated scripts. So now what I'm going to do is make another function example. So what I'm going to do is basically select everything and then delete it. A shortcut we can use is hitting Control A as an apple, so that we can select everything that's inside of the script, and then we can hit backspace to delete it. So now what we're going to do is make another function. I'm just going to say local function, let's say print ABC, open and close parentheses just like this, and I'm going to hit enter. So I'm just going to make 3 print statements by saying print open and close parentheses, in quotations, I'm going to say A, and then I'm going to make another print statement. So I'm just going to hit enter to to autocomplete this, and I'm going to say B, and then finally print C just like this. And now we can basically print out each of these messages just by calling the print ABC function just like this. And we can basically do the same thing down here, print ABC, open and close parentheses just like this. And we can do it again one more time just because why not? ABC, open and close parentheses. And now if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is ABC being repeated 3 different times because we called ABC one time, which is going to go through ABC, and then it's going to do the same thing again with ABC, and then finally do it one last time, which is A, B, and C. So I hope you're able to understand how these functions work and how this is going to be useful inside of future episodes. So that's pretty much going to be it for the introduction to functions. What I want you to do for today's learning objective is to create more functions that do different things. Like, let's say if we were to take one of these parts, and if we were to, let's say, change the material to something that's different every single time, or if we were to basically change one of these other properties to be something different, then you can go ahead and do that. And once you do that, then I want you to go down to the comment section and paste in your code so that other people can see what you've been doing. And so that's basically going to conclude this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be talking about 4 things that all link to each other to make this one video. Those being math, parameters, arguments, and return statements. But we're going to go through each of them one by one inside of this episode, and it's going to be one of the more important episodes, so I really want you to pay attention to this episode. So first thing we're going to start with is learning about math. Now, I'm going to assume that you know like the basics of math with operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, all those sorts of things. If you don't know how to do those things, well then I don't think you're ready for this video. I'm sorry to tell you that. But I'm going to assume that you do know those things. So if that is the case, then we can go ahead and continue with this tutorial guide. So what we're actually going to do is go to the right side and disable our function script. And we're going to go through the same thing, which is hitting the plus sign in the workspace, searching up for a script. We're going to insert that. And then we're going to rename this script. So right click on it and then rename to math, enter, just like that. Okay, and I'm also going to delete this statement right over here. So I'm going to hit Control A and then delete just like this. So when we're working with math, so in this case, it's going to be basic operations like addition, subtraction, all those other things. We basically take two numbers and then we do the operation that we specify in between those two numbers. And we can do this by having a variable if we want that to be the case. So what we can do is write a variable. So we're going to say local, and we can make this an addition variable. So we can call this just simply addition, but you can name this whatever you want to be. We're going to set this equal to two numbers with whatever operation we decide to use for this statement. So what we can do is put two numbers here. So we can say, let's say 2, and then we're going to say plus. So this is going to be a plus sign indicating addition plus 2, just like this. And if we were to print the statement, so if we were to say print, open and close parentheses, and then we throw in addition over here just like this, and we go into the game, hit play, then what we should see in the output is the number 4. So if we click on it, we can see that if we put 2 and then we put a plus sign with another 2, then that's going to be an addition of 2 plus 2, which is equal to 4. And that's going to be set equal to addition. And it's going to print that inside of the output with this addition variable. So I'm going to hit stop. And that is the basics of using math inside of your script. But there are other operations we can use. So if we were to, let's say, use subtraction, then we would replace this plus sign with a minus symbol just like this, which is 2 minus 2. Or we can replace this with the asterisk. So if we hold Shift 8, then this is what the multiplication symbol looks like for 2 times 2, which is 4. Or we can replace this with the division symbol, which is going to be a forward slash. So 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1. And so that's what it would print out inside of the output here. So that's the basics of using math. But this is going to be very helpful for the next two things we're going to be talking about, which is going to be parameters and functions. So what I'm going to do is go back to our game, and I'm actually going to disable our new math script that we just created. And I'm going to re-enable our function script over here. So this is the script we created in the last episode. Now, if you remembered how a function is created, we basically have a local keyword with the function declaration right here, and then the name of the function over here, and then we have open and close parentheses. So what's interesting about these open and close parentheses is that we can add parameters inside of these open and close parentheses so that we can use whatever's contained inside of these parameters in this function to get different results depending on what we use to call this function with. Now, that may sound confusing to you at first, but once we use this in practice, it'll make more sense. So what I'm going to do is delete everything that we've had in the script so far. So I'm just gonna hit backspace just like this, and we're going to create a new function that's going to add two numbers together. So what I'm going to do is say local function, and then we're just gonna call this just anything really. We're gonna call this addition, open and close parentheses. I'm going to select the right side and then hit enter just like this. And I'm going to go down here and then call the addition function just like this, addition, open and close parentheses. And now we have our function declaration and also our function call right over down here. So this looks pretty similar to what we worked with in the last function that we created, but this time we're going to add parameters. Now, basically what a parameter is, it's basically a value that we can pass into this function so that we can use this value to make calculations within this function that we're calling. And so the way we separate these values is and the way we create these values is by giving a name for each of these parameters. So if we wanted to add two numbers together, what we can do is basically make the name for our first number parameter. So what we can do is say number 1, just like this, but we can really call it whatever we want. We can even say num1, and we can even say n1, but for this example, we're just going to say number 1 like this. And each value that we add into this is going to be separated by a comma. So I'm going to add a comma, space, and then we're going to add the second number to here. So we're going to say number 2, just like this. And so these are our parameters that we can put inside of here so that we can make our addition calculation. So now what we're going to do here is with these two numbers that we have thrown into this addition function, we can create a result of the addition of these two functions. So we're going to say local result, or we can call this whatever we want, equals number 1 plus number 2. You can kind of think of these two numbers as variables for numbers that we pass into here. And so we basically add these two numbers together to get our result. And so we can now print our result variable that we just created, which is the result of these two numbers being added together. So now that we've added parameters, what we need to do is add arguments to this function so that it's basically represented as these two numbers right here. Now, what I'm talking about here is if we go down to the open close parentheses inside of our function call, we can see that Roblox is telling us that we need to add a number for number 1, and we need to add a number for number 2. So in this case, we can add two numbers, let's say 5, and we can replace this with a comma, and then Roblox is going to tell us that we need a number 2 as well. So we can put in, let's say 2. So basically, this is an argument, and this is a parameter. The difference between arguments and parameters is that parameters is what we use to basically create our variables inside of our function declaration, and this is how we make our calculations. The arguments is going to be what values we throw into this function for the calculations that we're going to create inside of here. So as a result of this, what we're going to do now is go into the game and hit play. And what we should see in the output is the number 7, because what we did was we took number 1 and number 2, we passed them in as the first argument for number 1, which is 5, and then the second argument for for number 2, which is 2. We add them together, and then we print out the result. I hope this part is making sense to you so far. It's a very important concept you need to know about, and this isn't restricted to just numbers. You can literally put in any values you want inside of here. So this could be, let's say, a string, which is gonna be whatever it is, or it could be a Boolean as well. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as the calculations are accurate, because obviously you can't calculate a string plus a number, and you also can't calculate a Boolean plus a number as well. So you have to make sure that whatever you pass inside of here is accurate to your calculations that you try and make. And I hope this part has made sense to you up until this point. We can even do this multiple times by dropping a line and then calling the addition function again. So we can put in, let's say, 3 as the first number and then 2 as the second number. And we can even add another addition function right here, which is, let's say, 9 for the first number and then 4 for the second number. If we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is different results depending on the numbers that we gave this function. So now this function gives different results based on the arguments that we give it versus giving us the same result every single time we call this function, which is why parameters and arguments are very powerful when it comes to adding these inside of your functions when you make them inside of your scripts. Now, there's one final thing we're going to do before we end off this video, and that's going to be introducing return statements. Now, basically what a return statement is it's a value when it gets calculated, it's going to return that value so that it's going to go back into where we called this function. Now, I don't know if that completely made sense to you, but if I showed you through scripting, then I think you'll be able to understand it better. So what I'm going to do is delete these function calls to make this more simple. And instead of printing this result value, what I'm actually going to do is return this result once we calculate what number 1 plus number 2 is. So I'm going to delete this print statement, and what I'm going to do instead is say return in all lowercase, and then we're going to return this result. So we're going to say result just like this. And so this is our return statement. Now, what does this return statement do? Well, it returns the result of the calculation that we created back to where we called this function. So what we can do is create a variable that is attached to this function call so that we can take that value and then print it ourselves outside of this function. So what we're going to do is say local. We can call this print result just to make this just to differentiate this between this result. And we're going to set this equal to the function itself. So we're going to say addition, open close parentheses, and we can put in whatever two numbers we want inside of here. So we're going to say 8, and then for the second number, we're going to say 2, just like this, as we separate these by commas. And this is basically how we get the result. It's by calling this function, and then once we add these two numbers, we return the result. So it's going to go back into here, and that's what print result is going to be set equal to. So now if we go down here and then write our print statement with print result, just like this, if we go into the game, hit play, then what we should see in the output is 10, because we did exactly what the script is supposed to do with return statements. So we create a variable on the outside. We set this equal to addition with our two numbers right here. These two numbers are then added, and then we use this return statement to return the result back to the print result variable. And so now we are printing that result, and that is how we use return statements inside of Roblox Studio. I hope this part has made sense to you so far. And if it has, this has been one of the more difficult things to learn about. So I can commemorate you if you've been able to follow along up until this point. So now what I'm going to do is hit stop, and that is basically going to be it for this episode. Now, I want you to keep in mind that up until this point, we haven't really been saving our work. It is very important to save our work after we do anything important so that we don't lose any progress. So I'm going to go hit file, and then we're going to hit save to file. Now, you can also hit Control S, S for snake, so that we can save our game whenever we make changes to the game. So that's one more thing I wanted to add before we ended off this video. For today's learning objective, what I want you to do is make more functions. So I want you to make a function for subtraction. You can even do multiplication and division as well, or you could even add more numbers to add as well. So you can have another parameter right here, so number 3, and you can do more calculations like dividing number 3 or something. There's a lot of possibilities you can have with this. You can add more parameters. You can make more functions that returns results or doesn't return results. You have a lot of capabilities and leeway for this learning objective. So I hope you make something really great out of this learning objective. And once again, go down to the comments once you're finished and paste in whatever code you made so that other people can see what you've been doing that you're comfortable sharing. So with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about if statements, but we're also going to be talking about else if statements and also else statements, since they all tie to the same concept. So the first thing we're going to do is go on the right side, and we're going to disable any previous script we've made in the past couple episodes. So the one that's currently active is my function script, so I'm just going to disable this. And I'm going to insert a new script inside of the workspace by hitting the plus sign, searching up a script, and inserting a script inside of the workspace. I'm going to select this, right click, and I'm going to rename it to if statements, just like this, hit enter. And I'm also going to X out these tabs for these previous scripts just to make things more organized. And I'm also going to zoom in by holding control and moving inward just like this so we can see the text better. And now we have our proper setup for what we're going to be talking about for this episode. Okay, now if statements, it's a fundamental concept that we need to know when it comes to adding logic to our scripts if we want to have a structure of executing specific codes if conditions are met. So what I'm talking about here with conditions is we're going to start with a if keyword in all lowercase. So it's going to look like this. And when we're making a conditional statement, it's tied to a Boolean value to determine if a condition either returns true or either returns false. So an example I can give you is if we were to see if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, which obviously it is true. But if we were to type this out, so if we were to say 2 plus 2 equals 4, just like this, then we would have a true Boolean be returned with this conditional. Now you might see some errors here, and you might be wondering what this is all about. We can't use a single equal sign if we're trying to compare two numbers together. So 2 plus 2, that's 4, equals 4. Because this single equal sign is supposed to be an assignment operator. So we're trying to essentially set whatever's on the left side to whatever's on the right side. But if we're just doing a comparison, then what we need to do is add another equal sign just like this to make it a comparison operator and not an assignment operator. And so once we do this, then what we're going to do on the right side is say then, just like this. So if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, then what we're going to do is hit enter, and then Roblox is going to add an end keyword at the end here. So basically, if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, then we can run whatever's inside of this branch. So we're going to write a print statement saying that 2 plus 2 does equal to 4, just like this. So now if we go into the game and hit test and hit play, then what we should see in the output is that 2 plus 2 does indeed equal to 4. Now, let me tell you what happens if this does not equal to 4. So if I hit stop and I go back into our script, and then if I were to say if 2 plus 3 is equal to 4, which in this case, it's not true because 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. If we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is nothing being printed because 2 plus 3 does not equal to 4. That's why it basically skipped this line. So it's not going to print out this statement right here. So I'm going to hit stop again. And now that's basically how we have our first branch with if statements, but there's more we can add on top of this. And the next branch I can show you is an else statement. So basically what we're going to do is inside of our block of code we have over here, we're going to drop 2 lines like this. It could be 1 or 2 lines, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to hit backspace so that we have proper indentation right here to line up with the if keyword. So we're going to say else just like this, and then we're going to hit enter. So then what we're going to do is add another print statement like this saying the if statement failed, just like this. So what's going to happen here is it's going to check if 2 plus 3 is equal to 4. And if it's not true, then it's going to go down to this else statement and it's going to print out whatever is inside of this block of code right here. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is that the if statement failed because we tried checking if 2 plus 3 is equal to 4, which we know is not true. So that is something you can do with the else statement. And once again, some things to keep in mind is you need to have your else keyword line up with the if statement. It can't be over here. And it most certainly cannot be, I don't know, over here or something. It has to line up with the if statement. And you need to have each branch be indented like this for each part of the if statement. So I'm going to hit stop, and that is basically how we add an else statement to it. But now I'm going to show you what an else if statement is. So an else if statement is basically another if statement that gets checked if the first if statement fails. So basically what it's going to look like is we're going to drop 2 lines again here, and I'm going to hit backspace so that we line up with the if and the else accurately. So we're going to say else if, just like this. So this is one word, else if. We're going to say if 2 plus 2 equals to 4. And then we're going to hit enter. And now what we can do here is say print, open and close parentheses, 2 plus 2 does actually equal to 4 here. Just to like differentiate it a little bit. So We first start with our if statement. So 2 plus 3 does not equal to 4. So it's going to skip this and it's going to go down here to check if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. This is true. So it's going to print this statement and it's going to skip the else because we know that this is true. So if we go into the game and hit play, then we should see in the output that 2 plus 2 does actually equal to 4 here. So that is our if statement structure that we have going on here that I think you'll find to be extremely useful. Now we can add more else if statements if we want to here. So if we drop a line and then go down here, we can write another else if here by saying if 1 plus 1 equals to 2, then we can print 1 plus 1 does equal to 2, just like this. And we're also going to change this to something different so that we can make sure that this one passes through correctly. So if we hit play, then what we should see is 1 plus 1 does equal to 2. So if we hit stop and go back to our script, we can see how this logic applies because we start here, it doesn't work. We then go over here, it doesn't work. And then we go over here, it does work. So then it prints the message and it basically skips the else if nothing works. The only time it would go into the else is if all of these statements did not work. So you can kind of understand the structure going on here. And it's definitely very important to understand if a certain criteria or condition is met, then we're going to execute a specific part of the code and not execute the other parts of the code if we don't need to have that. Now, this is going to be useful for our functions that we've created in previous episodes. So that's actually what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to select everything here. So I'm going to hit Control A and I'm going to hit backspace. So now what we're going to do is create our addition function just like we did in previous episodes by saying local function addition, open and close parentheses, and then we're going to pass in 2 arguments. So the first argument is going to be number 1, and then we're going to separate this with a comma, and then we're going to have number 2 as our second parameter. So then we're going to hit enter, and then what we're going to do is have our if statement structure inside of this addition function so that we can print stuff depending on what the result is from this. So what we're going to do is write a result variable by saying local result equals number 1 plus number 2, just like this. And then we're going to drop 2 lines down here. And then we're going to make an if statement. So we're going to say if result equals 4. So once again, make sure you're using 2 equal signs, not 1 equal sign, because we're comparing values together rather than assigning variables. So we're going to say then we're going to make a print statement by saying the result is equal to 4. And then we're going to make an else if statement by saying else if result equals to, let's say, 6. Then we're going to make a print statement by saying the result is equal to 6, just like this. And if both of these fail, then we're just going to write an else statement. Once again, make sure that the alignment is correct over here. So we're going to say else, and then we're going to say print none of these results add up. Just like that. And so now we're going to call this addition function down here by saying addition, open and close parentheses. So the first number we're going to add is 2, 2, so it's going to fall under this branch, and then we're going to make another addition function call right here, and then we're going to put 3 and 3 just like this, and then we're going to make another addition function call by saying 4 and 2, so both of these are going to fall under this one, and then we're going to make an addition function call for, I don't know, some big number like 10 and 10. So now what will happen is if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is the result is equal to 4, so it checked 2 and 2, which in this case it is true. Then it's going to check for 3 and 3, which does equate to 6, and then finally 4 and 2, which also equates to 6. So it printed this twice. And then obviously for 10 and 10, that equals to 20, which didn't fall into any of these conditions. So it went into the else statement saying that none of these results added up. So this is how we can add our if statements to our functions. And you can probably think of other ways you can add this inside of your scripts now that we know that we can use conditions to execute code when it meets certain requirements. So I'm just going to hit stop, and that is essentially the end of understanding if statements. One final thing I want to mention here is understanding what happens if we have two if statements. So I'm actually going to delete this else and else if statement over here. So I'm just going to select these two and then hit backspace and then backspace again. So now let's see what happens if we have another if statement. So if we say if result equals to 4, then we're going to make a print statement by saying basically the same thing over here. So I'm just going to copy what was in here. So I'm going to hit Control C, and then I'm going to select this and then hit Control V just like this. And I'm also going to get rid of these 3 addition function calls right here just to have this one. So now if we go into the game, hit play, then what we should see in the output is the result is equal to 4 being printed out twice. Because if we go inside of our script, then it's first going to check if the result is equal to 4, then it does print this. But then it's going to go down here to check again if the result is equal to 4, then the result is equal to 4. Now, obviously, it doesn't have to be this condition specifically. Like, it doesn't have to be the same condition, but it has to be like 2 different if statements that meet the requirement of whatever this condition is to then execute both of these code blocks. So that is something important to know about when you're using if statements, is that if you have multiple if statements, then it's going to check for each of these if statement blocks. But if you have an if and else structure, then it's only going to fall under one of those code blocks. And I hope that makes sense to you. So that's basically going to be it for this episode. For today's learning objective, you basically have a lot of power with what you want to do with these if statements and also functions and all these other sorts of things. So I want you to definitely experiment with this before you move on to the next episode and see what you can come up with. And once you do that, then I want you to go down to the comment section and paste your code that you feel comfortable sharing to everybody who's watching these tutorial guides as well. And with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about scoping. Now, this is once again another important concept we need to know about, and before I'm able to explain it to you, what we're going to do is first go inside of one of our scripts that we've already created in past episodes. Instead of creating a new script, we're actually just going to go back to our if statements scripts that we created in the last episode. So I'm just going to double click on this. And what we're going to do is actually delete everything we've had so far with the script. So I'm just going to select everything and then hit backspace to delete everything. And for this episode, we're going to be talking about scoping. Now, in order for me to explain what scoping is and why it's useful, we're first going to write a variable that is set equal to something within the game. So what we're going to do is say local, let's just say my amazing base plate, just like this. We're going to set this equal to the base plate that's located within the game. So we're going to say game.workspace.baseplate, just like this. And now we have a variable that's attached to the game's base plate. Now, we were also able to write functions as well. So if we were to drop 2 lines down here and write a function, we would say local function, and then we could just say, I don't know, my great function, open and close parentheses, select the right side and then hit enter, just like this. This is how we created a function, and this is how we created a variable. Now, why am I having you write all these things? Well, the purpose of this episode is to help you understand this keyword right here, local, and what the significance of this keyword entails. Now, for me to be able to explain to you the importance of scoping, let me try and picture a scenario for you. So I want you to imagine that when we're working with our scripts, we have all of these different variables that we want to work with. So if I were to create a new variable down here by saying local, my big number is equal to, let's say, 500,000 or something. I think this is, no, that's 5 million. Okay, 500,000. This is 500,000. So if we were to have this variable like multiple times, like this variable, if we were to just copy it and then go down here and paste it, and we just keep on doing that and then change these variables to be like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have all these different variables that we just created. And now we have access to these variables all throughout the entire script. What if I told you that this actually isn't a very optimized strategy to make variables, especially when you don't need to use these variables throughout the entire script? The reason that this is important is because if this script is allowing us to have access to these variables throughout the entire script, then that leads to unoptimization for like Roblox's backend when it's trying to make a game run very well, but also for security reasons as well. If you don't need to access a variable throughout the entire script, but instead need to access variables in specific parts of the script. So an example I can give is inside of a function. So I'm going to delete these variables that we just created here. And what I'm going to do is create a new variable inside of our function. So within this function, I'm going to say local true statement equals true, just like this. So we have a local variable called true statement, and we set that to true, which is a Boolean data type. So when we drop a line down here and then make a print statement by saying true statement, just like this, then obviously if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is, oh, well, sorry, my bad. We were supposed to call migrate function first, so I'm just going to do that very quickly. Go into the game and hit play. Then what we should see in the output is indeed true because we created a true statement variable that was set equal to true and we printed that. Now, here's the catch here. So if I hit stop and we go inside of our if statement script and I moved this print statement outside of here. So if I were to take this print statement, hit Control X to copy it to clipboard, and if I were to drop 2 lines down here and then paste it, then as you can see, Roblox is throwing an error here. So this says unknown global true statement, because when we're working with scoping, we have to worry about local variables and we also have to worry about global variables. Global variables are basically what allows us to access variables either within the entirety of a script or a variable that can be accessed outside of the script in other scripts. So that's the importance of understanding how scoping works, because we created this local variable called true statement inside of this function. So this variable can only be accessed within this function and can't be accessed outside of this function. If we try to access true statement outside of the function, then it's just going to say that Roblox doesn't know any variable called true statement because it's only within the scope of this function. Now, if I were to take this true statement declaration, so if I were to hit Control X and then move it up here, hit Control V, then it's going to say down here that there's no longer an error because we know that true statement is now declared up here. That's not pertained to any specific code block within our script. So that's the importance of understanding scoping, and I highly recommend for the most part when you're writing your variables that you should have this local keyword. So I wouldn't really find any reason for you to make global variables. Like basically a global variable is if you took off the local modifier like this, and it would just say true statement is equal to true. I would highly discourage not creating variables just like this because when you use local variables, it only is tied to specific bits of the code that you need to access this variable in. And I'm also pretty sure if you try to create a global variable inside of a function, it just doesn't work, especially if it has a local modifier like this. So if I were to say my new variable equal to 10, then it's not going to work because it says that only a local variable can be created inside of a function. So that's my recommendation to you. So now what we're going to do is add more logic to our function inside of here. So to further add on to what I'm going to show you for scoping, what I'm going to do is create another variable here by saying local result is equal to, let's say a nil value. Now, I didn't introduce to you what nil is. It's basically a nothing value. So it's actually a data type that represents a value that doesn't exist. So this is something very quickly I want you to keep in mind here, is that this result variable is a value that literally is nothing. So that's how we indicate a nothing value data type. So now what I'm going to do is drop 2 lines and write an if statement by saying if result is equal to nil, which obviously nil is equal to nil, nothing is equal to nothing, then what we're going to do is create another variable. So we're going to say local result 1 equals true. or something as random as this. So result 1 is equal to true. We're going to then print out the result 1 just like this. And then what we're going to do is if this is not nil, which obviously it is nil, but let's imagine it's not nil. So we're going to align our else keyword to be like this. And then we're going to say local result 2. So we're creating another variable. We're going to set this equal to false. And then we're going to print result 2. So here's what's important here that I want you to get at. When we traverse through this function, so result is going to be equal to nil. So we're first checking if result is equal to nothing. Then we're going to go down here and then create a new variable called result1 that can only be accessed within this block, this if statement block. And if result is not equal to nil, then it's going to go down here and create a second result variable that can only be accessed within this scope. So if I were to try and print out, let's say down here, print result 1, then it's going to say that unknown global result 1, because once again, scoping is what's important here to understand. It can only be accessed where it was created, which is this code block inside of the if statement. And result 2 can only be accessed within this code block of where it was created. And so when you're working with scoping, this is something that's really important to understand. And I hope that this has made sense to you and at least gave you a good understanding of how this all worked. One last simple example I can give here is if I were to, let's say, create a new variable, like let's say local my second variable equals, let's say the string is going to be, I don't know, string, like something as random as this. If I were to make a print statement before we created the variable, so if I were to say print, let's say my second variable just like this, then it's not going to work because we need to be able to access this second variable after it's been created, because we're trying to access a variable that hasn't even been created yet, which is why, again, scoping is what's important here to understand. And I think these are all of the examples I can give you when it comes to understanding scoping, and I hope you're able to take away the idea and concept and also importance of scoping. So with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. For today's learning objective, what I want you to do is try and practice and familiarize yourself with the concept of scoping by creating variables, moving references around, and also just trying to, let's say, make more if statement branches inside of here where you create even more variables and you try to access them in different parts of the script. I think it's definitely good practice to do that. So once you're done with that, then go down to the comment section, share your code that you're comfortable sharing to other people. And that is basically going to be it for this episode. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about operators. So just like at the start of every single tutorial we've been doing up until this point, we're going to click on our script that we created in the previous episode, we're going to disable it, and then we're going to insert a script inside of the workspace by searching up script like this, inserting it, and then we're going to right click and rename this to the name of the episode, which is going to be operators like this, and then we're going to hit enter. And then we're also going to delete our code here, so now I can introduce to you what operators are. So in the last episode, we were introduced to if statements, which basically allowed us to check for a specific condition that needed to be met before we executed specific parts of our script. So an example of this is if we were to write if, let's say true, then we're going to hit enter, and then we're going to write a print statement here saying this statement is true, just like this. And if we were to run this inside of Studio, obviously it's going to print. So if we go to the game and hit play, then it's going to say this statement is true, because what we did was for this condition, we literally gave a Boolean condition of true. So this automatically makes it a true statement. So that's the basics of using if statements. But now for the purpose of this episode, I'm going to be introducing to you a bunch of operators that can add more complexity to our conditionals so that we can have very precise and effective comparisons that doesn't just restrict to one condition here. We can have multiple conditions, and we can even compare different things depending on what the operator we're using is. So basically, there's two types of operators that I'm going to be introducing to you, and the first one is going to be logical operators. So logical operators is what allows us to add more conditionals to the same if statement that we have over here. So instead of just having one conditional, we can have more than one conditional to see if more than one condition is met before we go inside of this if statement and print out whatever's inside of here. So the first logical operator that I'm going to be showing you is the operator called and. And basically what we're going to do is on the right side of true, we're going to hit space and then we're going to write in all lowercase and then we can now put in a second conditional on the right side of this and statement. So we're going to say, let's say false in all lowercase. So this statement compares true and it also compares false. And in order for this statement to be valid, for this conditional to be met, both the left conditional and the right conditional needs to be true. And in this case, because the left side is true, but the right side is not true, that means this statement actually isn't going to run because this conditional was invalid. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is nothing inside of the output, because we told this if statement that both the left and the right side needs to be true in order for this statement to be valid, based on this and logical operator. So if we hit stop, then I'm going to go back to our script and I'm going to be showing you another logical operator called or. So all we're going to do is replace this and keyword with or, just like this. And basically what or does is it checks if one of these conditions is true. So because this statement is true, it's automatically going to go down to this print statement without even checking whether this right side is true or not, because for or, all we need is just one of these statements to be true so that we can move on to whatever the code is inside this if statement. So that is how we use and that is how we use or. Now, if I were to make these inside of a different example with using numbers, then I'm just going to delete this. And let's say if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and if, let's say on the right side, we can say if 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. So this left side returns true because 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and this right side is going to return true because 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is this statement is true. And if we hit stop and go back to our script, and if let's say we were to change this statement on the right side to be if 5 plus 6 is equal to 10, so in this case, this is not going to be true anymore. If we go into the game and hit play, then it's not going to print anything inside of the output. Now, if we were to stop and go back to our script and change this keyword to or instead of and, then only one of these statements need to be true. So if you go back into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is this statement is true because 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and that's all we need to know about. Now, there's one more logical operator that I want you to know about, and that is called not. And we actually don't put that in between two different statements, but instead we're going to put this before one conditional statement. So what this is going to look like is we're going to delete this code that's over here. And what I'm going to do is say if not, like this, and then we're going to put a conditional after this one. So we're going to say if not true, then print whatever's down here. Now, basically what not does is it gives us the opposite of whatever this conditional statement is over here. So this true statement is actually going to return false because the not keyword gives us the opposite of true, which is going to be false. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is nothing being printed because this actually printed false instead of true. Now, if we hit stop and then go to our script and then change this to false, then it's going to return the opposite of false, which is going to be true. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is this statement is true. And now if we were to hit stop and make this into a numerical example, so I'm just going to delete this. And what we're going to do is say if not 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, then we're going to print the statement. Now, obviously, this statement is true, but because we have the not before it, it's actually going to return false. Now, the thing that you have to be careful about with this is we actually have to put in parentheses inside of our Boolean expression. So let me show you what happens if we actually don't do this. So I'm going to go into the script and hit play. It's going to show in the output that it attempted to perform an arithmetic on Boolean and number. And the reason it did this was, so if we hit stop and go to our script, it did this because it's reading this by saying if not 2. You can't compare not with a number. So what we need to do is insert parentheses like this so that we know that we're trying to compare this statement specifically. So 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. That's going to return true, but the not is tied in front of it, so it's actually going to return false. So if we go into the game, hit play, then what we should see is this statement not returning false. So that is basically logical operators inside of Roblox Studio, and that is something important that we need to know about for our conditionals. Now, the next set of operators I'm going to teach you is what's called relational operators. And this has to do with the way we've been comparing conditional numbers. And this has to do with the way we've been comparing equations inside of our conditionals. So I'm just going to delete everything we've had in this code up until this point. And what I'm going to do is say if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, just like this. So relational operators fall into what we've been doing with this comparison inside of here. So if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, which it is, then it's going to return true. This is one relational operator, which is the equals relational operator. But there's actually multiple different ways we can compare this relational operator that isn't just restricted to the equals. And there's actually 6 relational types that I'm going to be showing you one by one. So the first one is the equal sign, and the next one I'm going to show you is the opposite of that, which is going to be not equals. And so basically what we're going to do is replace this first equal sign. So we're going to hit backspace on this, and we're going to replace this with a squiggly line that looks like this. So I'm going to hold shift, and then I'm going to hit the squiggly line. Now for me, it's located on the top left of my keyboard, so I hope you're able to see it. But when you do make this squiggly line before the equal sign, this represents not equals. So if 2 plus 2 is not equal to 4, then it's going to print this statement over here. Now, this used to be true, but now this is actually going to return false because it's trying to say if 4 is not equal to 4, which is not true. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is nothing because we're trying to say if 4 is not equal to 4, which is not true. I hope this part is making sense to you so far. So now there's 2 more operators that I want to show you. So I'm actually going to delete these 2 lines right here. And what I'm going to do is say if 2 plus 2 is greater than 4. So greater than is indicated by this right arrow over here. And basically what this means is if this number on the left side is greater than this number on the right side, then it's going to return a true statement. Now, obviously, this is not going to return true. So if we add, let's say 2 plus 3 is equal to 4, so 2 plus 3 is equal to 5, then it's going to be greater than 4. So this is going to be a true statement. So if we go into the game, hit play, then what we should see is this statement is indeed true. So I'm going to hit stop, and then we're going to go back to our operator. And we can basically do the opposite by saying if 2 plus 3 is less than, so if we put in a left arrow symbol before whatever's going to be on the right side, then this is going to compare if this is less than what's on the right side, which obviously in this case, 5 is not less than 4, so this is not going to be true. So if we go into the game and hit play, then we should not see anything be printed in the output. So I'm going to hit stop once again, go back to our script. And now there's 2 more relational operators I want to show you. So we learned about greater than, and we also learned about less than. But now we're going to say if this is greater than or equal to. So basically what this means is if this statement on the left side is greater than this statement on the right side, or if it's equal to whatever's on the right side, then it's going to make the statement true. So if I say 2 plus 2 is greater than or equal to 4, 2 plus 2 is not greater than 4, but it is equal to 4. So this statement is going to be true. And we can do the same thing for the less than symbol as well by replacing this greater than symbol with the less than symbol, just like this. And this is going to compare if the left side is less than or equal to whatever's on the right side. Now, I do want you to be careful because a lot of people get this mixed up where they have the equal sign on the left side before the operator on the right side. So you can't say equals greater than this, like it's some rocket symbol right here, or less than like this. You have to make sure that the operator is on the left side of the equal sign when you are comparing greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. So that is the basics of using relational operators and logical operators inside of your scripts. And If there was some parts of the script that and if there were some parts of this video that confused you, then I encourage you to re-watch certain parts of this video so that you can nail this down inside of your head so that you can understand how adding operators inside of your conditionals work inside of your scripts. So with that being said, for today's learning objective, what I want you to do is continue experimenting with adding more conditional statements by adding more operators inside of your conditional statements by, I don't know, adding another and statement with 5 plus 10 is equal to, I don't know, 15. And you can just continue onward with what you want to add for your conditionals. Now, another quick thing I want to mention is that you can have more than one logical operator inside of here as well. So we can have an and here, and we can have an or here with another conditional, and then we can have another and here with another conditional, and it can just keep on going for as long as you'd like. So that's something else you can do with your conditionals, and I recommend experimenting with adding logical and relational operators inside of your scripts. And once you're done with that, then I want you to go down to the comments and paste whatever code you feel comfortable sharing to everybody else so that everyone knows what you've been up to with these challenges as well as yourself. So with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about loops. Once again, another very fundamental concept in scripting, but also programming in general, that you will need to know not only for game development, but also for whatever programming endeavor you will have, anything past that. So, as usual, what we're going to do is go on the right side and we're going to disable our previous scripts that we created in the last episode. We're going to disable it and then create a new script inside of the workspace, just like this. And we're going to rename this to the name of the episode, which is loops. And then we're going to hit enter. I'm going to delete this. And first thing I would like to do is try and paint a scenario for you where we would want to repeatedly execute the same pieces of code over and over and over again. If we were to, let's say, have 3 print statements by saying print, let's say, statement 1, and then we were to make another print statement down here, so we're going to write another print statement with statement 2, and then we can do another print statement by saying statement 3. So we have these 3 print statements right here, but if we were to copy this and then go down here and then paste this, and then if we were to just do this over and over again, so I'm just going to hit Control V to basically just paste everything inside of here repeatedly over and over and over and over and over and over again, then this is not a really great approach to print all of these statements all at the same time. Like these 3 specific lines of code for each block, this is not really the best way to go about this. Because as you can see, this already took 43 lines for, what is it, like 8 or 9 different blocks of print statements that we're trying to print here. So that's why this isn't the most effective way to do it. But there is an alternative that works a lot better than what we're doing right here, and that is called using a loop. So what I'm going to do is select everything that we've created here. So I'm going to hit Control A, and then I'm going to hit backspace. So let me introduce to you what a loop is. A loop is basically what allows us to go through a specific block of code for either a specific number of times or an indefinite number of times until a certain condition is met so that we can stop this loop and we can stop going through the same lines of code over and over again. Let me show you what this will look like in a practical example. We first need to understand the structure of what a loop looks like. And the first thing we're going to do is write a for loop. Now, a for loop is basically what allows us to loop through specific blocks of code over and over again until we hit a certain criteria and we know how many times we want to execute this block of code. So what we're going to do is write the for keyword just like this, and we need to write a counter variable. So this can be whatever name we want it to be for the counter variable. We could just call this my counter just like this. And then what we need to do is set this equal to a initial value. So this is going to take in 3 numbers. The first one is going to be the starting value, and this can be whatever starting value you want. I'm just going to say 1, for example, and then we're going to separate this with a comma, and then we need to put down an end value. So when is this loop going to stop? I'm going to say 5 for this example, and then I'm going to write one more comma here, and then we're going to put down how much is this counter going to increment by whenever we reach the bottom of the for loop. So this is going to be, let's say 1 for this case. And then what we're going to do is, instead of writing then, we're going to actually write the keyword do, just like this, and then we're going to hit enter. And then what we're going to be putting down inside of here is our statements that we had in the previous example that I just showed you. So it was print statement 1, and then we just copied this, pasted it down here 2 times, and then we had statement 2 and then statement 3, just like this. So basically what we're doing is we're starting at whatever this counter value starts at, which is going to be 1. And then once we go down this loop for the first iteration, it's going to print statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3. And then it's going to go back up here to increment the value by whatever this incremental number is, which is going to be 2. So now we are on the second iteration. It's going to print 1, print 2, print 3, and then it's going to go back up again and then increment this counter variable to 3, go back down 1, 2, 3, and then it's going to increment to 4, 1, 2, 3, and then finally it's going to go to its 5th iteration, 1, 2, 3, and then it's going to stop. So if we go into the game and hit test and hit play, then what we should see in the output is statement 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so these statements printed out 5 times because we started at 1 and then we reached the last value of 5. And so once we've done that, it basically printed these 3 statements here 5 times. So the equivalence of this would be printing this at once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, then 5 times. This loop is the equivalence of doing this, and it's a much better way of going about this, and it's a very important fundamental concept for you to know about when we want to repeatedly run the same commands over and over and over again until a certain condition is met. So that is how we use a for loop, but there's actually another loop that is also important to know about, and this is called a while loop. Now, a while loop is basically used if we don't know how many times exactly we want to run this loop, but we do know that a certain condition needs to be met so that we can stop this while loop. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop 2 lines, and what I'm going to do is this structure for a while loop is different. So what we need to do is first specify our counter variables separately. So we're going to create a variable using the local keyword. So we're going to say local, let's say my while counter, just like this. And we're going to set this equal to, let's say 1. So basically the starting value right here. And then what we're going to do is write down our while loop by saying while, and then we have to write a condition here. So we can say that this condition is my while counter is, let's say, less than or equal to 5, just like this. And then what we're going to do is say do again at the end of this declaration. So we're going to hit enter. And then what we're going to do is basically write down our print statements that we had in the previous example and then paste it down here. Now, here is something you need to be extremely careful about, and that is incrementing this value every single time that we go through this iteration. Because as you saw with this previous example, all we needed to do was basically write down our print statements, and then the for loop would automatically increment the value by 1 because we specified it here in the declaration. But down here, if we were to execute this while loop, then my while counter still remains at 1 because we never updated this value once we reached the bottom. So if we started at 1 and then we went down here to print statement 1, statement 2, and then statement 3, it's still going to remain as 1, and it's never going to reach this criteria, so that it's going to result in an indefinite while loop, and that's going to be really bad because it's actually going to crash your game if you attempt to do this. So I recommend not doing this. It's something that people get tripped up about all the time. So you just need to remember that if you're making a while loop, you need to increment your value or decrement it by making it go backwards, however you made your conditional to be. But what we need to do is, once we finish our statements, we're going to drop a line and then we're going to increment the value. So we're going to say my while counter equals, we're going to take the value of my while counter itself. So my while counter plus 1. So basically we're taking the variable of my while counter and we're setting this equal to whatever the value of my while counter currently is, which is 1. and we're going to add 1 to it. So this is going to result in my while counter being equal to 2 instead of 1. And then it's going to go up until it reaches the condition where it's going to be equal to 5, and then that's when it knows that it can stop. So what I'm going to do is go into the game, hit play, and then what we should see in the output, well actually, okay, so we still have the previous for loop. So I'm actually going to delete what we had here very quickly. So I'm going to delete this, go into the game and hit play. Then what we should see in the output is statement 1, 2, and 3 being printed out 5 different times in the output. And it basically is working as expected. So that is how we write a for loop inside of our script. I'm going to quickly hit Control Z so that we can have our for loop back inside of a script so that you can see it, comparing the while statement. Now, there's a couple of things I want to show. Like, we can actually decrement our counter. So if we, let's say, started at 5, and then we wanted the goal to be going back to 1, and we make the increment value by -1, then it'll actually go backwards, but it's essentially going to do the same thing. So if I were to just delete this while statement right here and go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is 5 different print statements, again, addressing this for loop right over here, where we print statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3, except this time it's going backwards. So it's starting at 5, then it's going to go down here, and then it's going to decrement it by -1. So then it's going to be 4, and then it's going to go down here, 3, go down here, 2, go down here, and then 1, go down here, and then finally it's going to stop the for loop. So you can make your loops go backwards as well, which is another important thing to know about. And you can basically do the same thing with while loops as well. You just need to be careful about like what your starting value is, what your ending value is, and also what your increment or decrement values are. What we can also do, so I'm just going to hit Control Z again to just go back and go with our previous loop that we had before. And this time what we can do is actually have a bigger incremental value. So let's say 2, and we were to, let's say, have a starting value of 2 and then have an end value of 6. So I'm just going to delete this while true do statement again, go down here, hit play. Then what should happen is this is printing out 3 times. So statement 1, 2, and 3, statement 1, 2, and 3, and then statement 1, 2, and 3. Because we start at 2, and then it's going to go down here, and then it's going to increment by 2, so it's going to be at 4, and then go down here, and then finally it's going to be at 6, go down here, and then you basically get the idea at this point. So this is how you can control your counter variables when you're using for loops, and this can also work with while loops as well. So now I'm going to hit stop, and that is basically that. Now, another interesting thing we can do is we can have loops inside of our loops. So if we were to, let's say, go back to our previous example with starting at 1, ending at 5, and then incrementing by 1, we can have a loop inside of a loop. So I'm going to make this more simple by basically just making one print statement, basically just saying, I don't know, A, like as a simple example. And then what I'm going to do is create a for loop inside of this for loop. So I'm going to say for my counter 2 equals 1, comma, let's say 5, and then 1 again, and then we're going to say do print B, just like this. Now, what's going to happen here is we're going to start at 1 up here. So it's going to print A, and then it's going to go down here where it's going to print B 5 times before this counter gets incremented by 1 to then print our second A, and then it's going to print 5 more B's before it goes back up here. So if I were to go into the game and hit play, let me show you what this looks like in the output. So it prints A 1 time, and then it prints B 5 times. And then it prints the second A, and then it prints B 5 times, and it's just going to keep going until we reach the endpoint. So this is another powerful way you can use loops, is by using what's called nested loops, having a loop inside of another loop. So I definitely want you to be able to experiment with this once you use loops inside of your scripts. And that is basically how we are using loops inside of our scripts inside of Roblox Studio. Now, as for a final example, what I'm going to do is, let's say we want to use a for loop to change the color of this base plate. Then what we can do is first go back to our script. I'm actually going to delete everything that's inside of here. And what we're going to do first is make reference to our base plate. So we're going to say local base plate equals game.workspace.base plate like this. And then what we're going to do down here is make a for loop by saying for my counter equals 1, comma, let's do it 10 times. And then we're going to have an incremental value of 1. And then finally, do. So what we're going to do here is basically change the base plate's color to a certain color. So we're going to say base plate dot brick color equals. And what we're going to do is pick out a color from the brick color scroll wheel. So if we click on this, then what we can do is identify which color we want to have, and then we can basically just write down the color itself inside of our script. So let's say we want toothpaste. We need to match this name exactly as it is. So what we're going to do is select out of this, go back to our script, and then we're going to type in a brick color value. So you don't have to understand what this means, but just follow exactly what I do, and then we should be able to change our brick color. So we're going to say brick color dot new, open and close parentheses, and then we're going to put in whatever color it is we wanted to change this to, which is going to be toothpaste, just like that. And this is how we're going to be changing our color. Now, what we can do down here is we're going to drop a line. Now, here's the thing. When we're writing our for loops, or any loops in general, everything is going to be executed simultaneously without any weight to it. So if we were to basically make multiple brick color changes, then we won't be able to see these changes because it's happening so quickly. So what we actually need to do is pause our script for a specific period of time before we execute the next line of code. And this is what's called a wait statement that I'm going to show you what it looks like right here. So I'm going to drop a line. And what we're going to do is say task. So this is from Roblox's task library. And we're going to say dot wait, open and close parentheses. And then inside of here, we're going to specify the number of seconds that we're going to wait before we reach the next line of code. So in this case, I'm going to say, let's say 1 so that we can see the changes. So we wait 1 second before we change the brick color again. So what I'm going to do is copy this line and I'm going to paste it down here. And I'm going to change this color to something different. So what I'm going to do is put in the double quotations, and then we can pick whatever random color we want. This one says really red, so we could just auto-complete it by hitting enter. And then we can do this one more time by saying task.wait for about 1 second, and then paste in our line here, and then specify whatever color we want by putting in the double quotations. And then let's say we want to add gold. So I'm gonna select that, hit enter, and now we have our script. But one final thing we have to do is add one more task.wait here so that we can see the changes from this brick color change and then this brick color change, because once we finish the script, we're gonna immediately go back up and then we're going to change the brick color one more time for the next iteration. So now if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see inside of our base plate is that our brick color, or our base plate's color, is changing every single second 3 times for a total of 30 times, because it's going to change the brick color 3 times per iteration, and we're doing it 10 times in total. So once this brick color changes 30 times, that's when this loop finally stops, and then we now move on to the rest of the script. So that's essentially the basics of using loops inside of your Roblox games, and I hope you learned a lot from this episode. For today's learning objective, what I want you to do is basically go through and make more for loops, more while loops. You can even try making nested loops as well to change the base plate's brick color. And now that I've showed you how to use task.wait to wait for a specific piece of code to execute, then you can also add that to your scripts as well. You can probably change the brick color of the base plate. You can even change the transparency of the base plate, or you could do a whole bunch of other things. You could even manipulate some of your parts that you've created over here as well in previous episodes by using for loops and while loops. So with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is Brawldev, and in this episode we'll be talking about breaks and continues. Now before we do, I want to go back to our loops scripts that we created in the last episode, because there was something I didn't mention about using task.wait statements for these for loops and also while loops and things like that. I forgot to mention that if we were to have multiple for loops, like one for loop after another, so not a nested loop, but a for loop or a while loop or any kind of loop that happens back to back. Like let's say we had another for loop by saying for I equals 1, comma 100, comma 1 do, and then we write a print statement here saying this is the second for loop like this. You might expect both of these for loops to run, but in actuality, if we go into the game and hit play, then it's not going to print our second for loop, and instead it's just going to go through the color changing scripts that we had in the previous loop. Now, why is this happening? Well, because when we're going through our first for loop, it's going to go through the first iteration and it's going to change the base plate's brick color. It's going to wait 1, do this, wait 1, do this, wait 1, and then it's going to go back up here. But it's trying to wait until this for loop is finished before it goes down here to execute whatever it is that it's going to execute afterwards, which is why it's important for us to realize when we want to execute our for loops or our while loops, because the order matters when it comes to doing these sorts of things. Now, there are ways we can spontaneously run for loops at the same time, but that's going to be covered in a future episode in my advanced scripting tutorial guide, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But that's just something I wanted to add on to that before we continued with what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. Okay, so now that we've covered that, let's go back to our loop script so we can talk about what breaks and continues are. So I'm going to delete basically everything that we have in the script up until this point. So I'm going to hit Control A and then hit backspace. And what I'm going to do is create another for loop. So I'm going to say let's make our incremental value, let's say I this time. So we're going to say for I equals 1, comma, let's make some really big number, like let's say 100,000 like this. And then we're going to have our incremental value as 1. Now, here's another thing I didn't mention in the last episode, and that is you actually don't need to have an incremental value if you know that it's going to be 1, because the incremental value is going to be 1 by default. So I'm actually just going to delete that because we're going to be incrementing it by 1. Unless you wanted it to be something different like 2 or 3, then yeah, this is the only time you would need to have the incremental value. But in this case, we don't need it. So we're going to say 1, comma 100,000 do, and then we're going to hit enter just like this. Now, if we were to run this for loop 100,000 times, it's pretty ridiculous with how much processing power is going to be needed in order to execute whatever is going to be inside of here. So if I were to make a print statement saying this statement is printed, just like this, then obviously we wouldn't really want to go through all 100,000 of these iterations, because at some point we may want to stop if a certain condition has met. Like if, let's say, we were in the 200th iteration, then we would probably want to stop it before it reaches the 100,000th iteration. So what we can do is actually write a conditional by saying if I is equal to, let's say, 200, then what we're going to do is use what's called break, just like this. So it's going to go down the loop by starting at 1, and then it's going to keep incrementing until I reaches 200. And once it does, it's literally going to stop the for loop by using this break statement. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is this statement is printed 200 times, and it did not print 100,000 times like we were supposed to, because we made it stop at the 200 mark. And so this is very important. If certain conditions have been met for your for loop and you don't want the for loop or your while loop to run anymore, we can do the same thing with while loops. So if we were to delete this code right over here and write a while loop instead, so we're going to say, well, actually, we don't need to get rid of this. What we can do down here is just say our counter variable. So we're going to say local counter equals 1, comma, or no, sorry. So we're going to say local counter equals 1. So that's the value we're going to start at. And then what we're going to do is say while counter is less than or equal to some ridiculously big number, like let's say 1 million instead. We can do this number. So we're going to say do. So we're going to write our incremental statement because, as you know, a for loop does it for us, but a while loop doesn't. So we have to do it ourselves. We have to say counter equals counter plus 1, just like that. And that's going to happen at the very end of the while loop. So next thing we're going to do is check for a condition. If counter is equal to, let's say, 500, then what we're going to do is write a break right over here. Now, the first thing we're going to do is write our print statement by saying this while statement is printed just like this. And so now this is basically our while loop that does basically the same thing as this up here, except it's going to stop at 500 instead of 200. We can even confirm this by instead of 200. So now if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is this statement is printed in the for loop 200 times, and this while statement is printed 500 times, because that's when we decide to stop it. Now, that is essentially how we use breaks inside of a script, but there's another one we can use, and that is called continue. So what I'm going to do is delete these breaks that we had inside of our examples, and what I'm going to do for this for loop is basically say, if a certain condition is met, then we just want to skip this iteration. So basically what I mean is, if we start at the very top here by saying, if I is equal to, let's say 10, then we're going to make a print statement by saying I is equal to 10, so skip this iteration, just like that. And then that's basically going to, okay, and then what we're going to do is drop a line and then say the keyword continue like this. So what is happening with this for loop? So basically, if we start at 1, then it's going to check if I is equal to 10. If it's not, then it's just going to go down here and make the print statement. But if it does equal to 10, then it's going to basically use this continue keyword to skip this iteration so it doesn't make this print statement happen. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what should be happening is, oh, wait a minute, I forgot to break the script. Oh, this is about to be really slow. So, okay, so it looks like the script. Okay, so it looks like the script crashed. It said script timeout exhaust allowed execution time, and that's because if we go to our script, I forgot to leave the break statement inside of here, thinking that it was a good idea to just get rid of it. So take that as a lesson for me to not do that. What we're going to do in here is basically say if I is equal to 200, then we're just going to break the statement just like that. We need to be careful about that. And I think I'm going to do the same thing here as well. So if I is, or no, sorry, if counter for this while loop is equal to 200, then we're going to break it just like this. Okay, so I'm just going to separate these so that it's easier to read. But yeah, take that as a lesson to make sure that you do have break statements if you don't want to execute this many number of times. So what we were supposed to do here is if we go into the game, then we can see that it first states that this statement is printed 9 times, and then it goes to the 10th iteration by saying I is equal to 10, so we're going to skip this iteration. And then finally, it's going to print the rest of the statements until it reaches 200, and that is basically how this for loop structure goes with continues and also breaks. So these two are very important for controlling our for loops and also our while loops if we reach certain conditions inside of our scripts. So that is what I wanted to show you inside of this episode, and I hope you find this to be useful. Now, as an added bonus, I'm going to teach you about the concept of comments, because when we've been working with scripts up until this point, we've had lines of code that we just didn't want to execute while we wanted other pieces of code to execute, but we didn't want to delete the entire statement because we just wanted to bring it back once we were done with whatever it is we were trying to execute. So I'm going to be teaching you something that you can actually use to save your pieces of code that doesn't run so that we can have other pieces of code run inside of our scripts, and that is with the use of comments. So what I'm going to do is basically make our for loop and our while loop visible, just like this. And this is how we write a comment to basically block out code if we don't want to execute it inside of our script. So the way we write a comment is by basically putting in 2 dashes just like this. So it's going to be grayed out like this. And we can put in whatever we want inside of the script by writing, I don't know, a print statement here, with whatever it is we wanted to print inside of here. And as you can see, it's grayed out. So what this means is this line isn't going to be printed inside of our script, but it is going to be saved here in case we want to use this script later for testing purposes, or if we just wanted to add this back inside of our script for later use, then we can just uncomment this print statement, and it's going to show that we are able to run this again. So if we want to hide it, then we can just add in 2 dashes before it, and it's not going to run inside of a script. Now, if we want to comment out multiple lines, what we can do is basically put in 2 dashes, and then we're going to put in what's called hard brackets. So instead of parentheses, what we're going to use is hard brackets, and we're going to use 2 of them. So we're going to put in the left hard bracket and then another left hard bracket, and then we're going to hit enter. And we're going to hit enter again. And basically what's going to be contained inside of here is basically comments that make up multiple lines. because if we were to drop a line from this print statement, then it's just going to execute inside of our script. But we can have multiple comments within this block right here. So we can have a line here, we can have a line here, and then a line here. So it's just going to keep on going as long as it fits within the boundaries of this comment block. So now, with that in mind, we can comment out this while true do statement if we don't want to execute it by putting in 2 dashes just like this, and then the hard bracket, and then we're going to add 2 hard brackets at the end. So we're going to drop a line and then add the end bracket and then another end bracket just like this. And as you can see, this code block is now commented out, and we can put down more things inside of here, and this is not going to be executed. So if we go inside of the game, hit stop and then hit play one more time, then we can see that it's just going to be the for loop that executes, and it's going to skip this while loop. And once again, if we want to execute our while loop again, then we're just going to get rid of the comments so that we can show it up inside of our script again. So that's something very useful that I think you should be able to add inside of your scripts if you want to execute specific blocks of code, and if you also want to comment out blocks of code that you don't want to execute in this current time frame. Comments are also useful if you want to just have a human readable way to like express like what certain pieces of code do. So if I were to add a comment over here by saying this for loop goes through 100,000 iterations until certain conditions are met. So this is another way you can use comments. It's just by saying or explaining what pieces of code do. And that's another thing you can do with comments as well. So that's basically a short introduction to comments in this episode. So for today's learning objective, what I want you to do is add break statements and continue statements to your code, and also use comments to describe what your for loops and your while loops do, or just any pieces of code in general. And for whatever code that you don't use, I want you to comment them out using comment blocks or just comment statements. So you have a lot to do for this episode, so I'm excited to see what you do for this one. So once again, once you finish your code, I want you to go down to the comments, paste your code so that other people can see what you have done for this challenge if you're comfortable sharing it. So with that being said, that's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial guide. My name is Brawldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about events. Now, I want you to imagine that it's your birthday today. You just had a long, hard day of school, and you're walking back home from the bus, and you're about to open your front door. And when you do open your front door, you are greeted with a surprise birthday party that was hosted by your family. And now they're coming over to you to give you hugs, give you presents, and enjoy the rest of the day specifically for you because you opened your front door that basically triggered the situation to happen. Now, basically what I'm trying to get at here is the concept of events, where things happen because other things have happened. So that basically works the same way when we're using events inside of Roblox Studio, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do inside of this episode. So what we're going to do on the right side is basically click our script that we created in the last episode, disable it, and then we're going to insert a new script inside of the workspace just like this. I'm going to rename this to events, and then I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to delete this code. So events is a pretty broad topic to talk about in Roblox Studio, and it can be very complicated depending on what kind of events you're working with. So for the sake of this episode, I'm going to be introducing to you 2 built-in functions that Roblox Studio has. I'm going to be providing to you 2 built-in events that Roblox Studio has provided to us that I think are the most common ones used that I think you should be aware of. As for this tutorial. So what we're going to do is go back to our script, and there's going to be 2 of them. But the first one I'm going to introduce to you is the trigger or the event of when a player joins into the server. And this is called the player added event that lies within the player's folder. Now, it's very interesting because up until this point, we've only worked with the workspace folder contained within the game data model. But this time, we're actually going to be using an event that's contained within the player's folder inside of the game data model. So what we're going to do is go back to our script, and we are going to say game.players. So we're not going to say workspace, we're going to say players, and then we're going to say dot player added. And you can tell that this is an event with this lightning bolt symbol over here. So I'm just going to autocorrect this with player added. And here's the interesting thing. So we have our player added event, but we need to be able to connect this event to a function that is going to run when this is triggered. So basically what this is going to look like is we're actually going to put a colon symbol right here, and then we are going to say connect, just like this. You can either say connect with an uppercase C or a lowercase c. It doesn't really matter that much, but I'm going to say uppercase C. And then what we're going to do here is put in two parentheses, so open and close parentheses, just like this. And then we're going to put a function within these parentheses. So we're going to create a new function by saying function, open and close parentheses, and then we're going to go on this right side here, which is in between these two parentheses, and we're going to hit enter just like this. And one final thing is we're going to be adding a parameter that Roblox has provided to us, which is the player that has joined into the game for this event. So we can call this whatever we want, but I'm just going to say player just like this. And so this is the structure of how we create events and how we make function that fires once the event has been triggered. This is one way of writing it, but I'm going to show you the other way in just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is write a print statement here by saying a new player has joined into the game. And what's also interesting about this is we have the player itself, like the player object, being passed into this as a parameter. So we can actually do things with this player. And just for a simple example, we can print out the player itself just by saying print, open and close parentheses, and we can just pass in the player directly. And if we go into the game and hit play, then what should happen is it's going to say a new player has joined into the game, and then it's going to print out the name of my player, which is Brawl Battle, because I joined into the game, and this fires every single time a new player joins into the game. So that is one of the most common built-in events that Roblox Studio has for us that we can use. So I'm just going to hit stop, and what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you the other way of writing an event, and this one should be more familiar with the way we write functions and how it applies to an event. So what I'm going to do is delete our code that we have here up until this point, and we're going to create a function. So we're going to say local function. We can call this whatever we want. We can say player added just like this, and then inside of these parentheses, we're going to pass in our player parameter just like this, and then we're going to hit enter. So we can do the exact same thing we just did in the last example. We can say print a new player has joined, and we can even print out the player as well. Now we've created the function. We still need to add our player added event down here by saying game.players.player added connect, open and close parentheses. Now, instead of writing a new function inside of here, we can just simply pass in our player added function that we created on top of here previously. So we can just say player added, which is a reference to our player added function that we just created, and it's automatically going to pass in the player argument just like that. And this is another way we can write events and how we attach a function to these events when they get triggered. So if we go into the game and hit play, then it should basically say the exact same thing, saying a new player has joined, and it also printed out my username right down here. So that is basically how we write events inside of our scripts, and that is how we use the player added event. But now I'm going to be showing you the second event that is very commonly used, and that is called touched. So basically, every single object or instance that you can see inside of this workspace, like these parts and also the spawn location and this base plate, they have a built-in function called touched, which basically triggers if another part touches it. Now, what this means is we can either have another part touch a part, or we can have our player touch the part as well, because our player is also classified as a bunch of parts put together as well. So this is very useful if we want to have a touch detection for if a player steps on a part. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do for the rest of this tutorial. So what we can do is go into model, and we're going to click on part. So we're going to insert a new part inside the workspace, and I'm going to go to the right side, rename this part to touch part, just like this. And I'm also going to go down here, and I'm going to check this property called anchored. Now, basically what anchored is it's a property that allows us to hold a part in place so that it's not affected by gravity. So what I'm going to do is basically click on this move tool and I'm going to move it up here so that once it's up here, it's going to stay in place and it's not going to drop down due to gravity since we have this anchored property enabled. So now that we have this, let's go back to our script, and I'm actually going to delete everything we've had up until this point. So I'm going to hit Control A and delete. And I'm first going to make reference to our touch part. So I'm going to say local touch part equals game.workspace.touch part, just like this. And now what I'm going to do is say touch part dot touched. So this is an event that's contained within our touch part. And then we're going to say colon connect, open and close parentheses. We're going to create a new function. So we're going to say function, open and close parentheses again, and we're going to pass in the other part that touched this part. So we're going to say other part, just like this. And then in between here, we're going to hit enter. And so now what we can do is we can basically print out the other part that touched this part in specific, which is the touch part. Now, specifically what we can do is print out the name of this other part. So we can say dot name, just like this. So we can see what's touching this part inside of Studio. So if we go into the game, hit test and hit play, then what we should see is, first of all, the part is floating in midair because we enabled the anchored property. So if we touch it, what we should see is a bunch of parts touching this touch part. And these are all referring to parts that are contained within my character. So we have things like the upper right arm, the head, upper torso, left upper arm, and things like that. So we can keep on touching this, and it's going to basically print out every part that's touching this part that's over here. Now, because our character makes up many different parts, it's constantly firing in the output all of these different parts that's touching this part. So what we can actually do is, if we want to have, let's say, the player touch this part one time and then wait a certain amount of time before we're allowed to touch it again, we can use what's called debouncing, which is basically what allows us to have a cooldown for this touch. And I'm going to show you what this looks like really quickly. So I'm going to hit stop, and I'm going to go back to our script. And what we're going to do is create a Boolean value that basically says whether this part is currently being touched right now. So what we're going to do is say local part is touched equals false. So currently the part is not being touched. And so basically what we're going to do is drop a line at the start here, and we're going to check if the part is currently being touched or not. Okay, and so what we're going to do at the start here is we're going to write an if statement by saying if part is touched equals false. So basically, if the part is not being touched, then we can trigger whatever is going to be inside of here by saying then, like this, and then we're gonna hit enter. Then we're going to move our print statement inside of here, and what we're going to do at the start here is we're going to say part is touched equals true. Now that we know that part is touched is false, we're going to set this equal to true, and then we're going to make the print statement down here. Now to add a cooldown, what we're going to do is put in a task.wait for a certain number of time. We can put in however many number of seconds we can put in here. We can say, let's say 2 seconds. And then we're going to say part is touched is back equal to false, just like this. And this is basically how we add a debounce or a check or a cooldown to our touched event, just like this. We first check if nothing is touching the part, then we're going to say the part is being touched, and then we're going to wait 2 seconds, and then we're going to say that the part is no longer being touched, so we can touch it again. So if we go into the game, hit play, then what should happen is if we touch this part, then it's only going to say one thing has been touched, and it's not going to repeatedly print out or execute this event until we wait 2 seconds. So we touch it again, it's going to say something else has touched it, and then it's just going to do this after we wait for the cooldown. And that is basically how we add a cooldown to these event calls, and that is by using debounce. So I hope you learned a lot from this episode with events. Those are basically the basics of using events. And now for today's learning objective, what I want you to do is continue to use this touched event or use the player added event so that you can do more stuff with either the player or you can do more stuff with these parts. You can maybe even change the color of these parts if you step on it and make it go back after a certain period of time. There's a lot of possibilities you can do with this. So I encourage you to do that. And once you do that, I want you to go down to the comments so that you can paste your code so that other people can see what you're doing that you feel comfortable sharing. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Braldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about find first child and wait for child, which are two functions that Roblox has provided to us that's going to be very useful in locating objects within our game, and it's also useful to help us understand the structure of how a game is structured. So to recap, a game is basically comprised of all of these different folders that have its own specific use cases. Like let's say this workspace. It shows all of the parts that we can see within this 3D world that basically make up the workspace of the game. Now, when we're understanding this hierarchy, like if we open up this workspace has all of these different objects that are within this workspace folder. The workspace in this case is called a parent, and everything that's inside of this workspace is a child that belongs to the workspace parent. And we can continue going down this list by finding more objects that have stuff contained within them, like this base plate. So this base plate has a texture child, and this base plate is the parent of this texture child. And this base plate is the child of this workspace parent. And so you can kind of understand the structure from here on out with how the parent and child structure works inside of the Explorer. So with that understanding, now let me show you some things that can help us organize these parts before we start using these functions. So there's two ways we can organize stuff within our game. One of them is being models, and the second one is being folders. And I'm going to show you what both of them do. So if we go inside of the Explorer and we click on the plus sign next to workspace and we insert a model like this, so I'm going to click on model, it's going to add a model inside of the workspace. Now, basically what a model does is it groups parts together to make up one big part as a whole that's basically a model. So if we go into the model tab and we click on parts, so we insert a part here, I'm going to go to the right side and I'm going to rename this part to part 1. And what I'm going to do is drag this into the model that we just created. And now I'm going to duplicate this part. So I'm going to hit Control D and I'm going to select the move tool like so, and I'm going to move it this way. And I'm going to rename this part to part 2, and I'm going to duplicate it one more time, and I'm going to move it this way and call this one part 3. Now, since all of these are contained within a model, if we hover over one of these parts, then it's going to select all 3 of the parts because it's all contained inside of one model. So if I select one of these parts, then it's going to select the model rather than the individual part itself. And we can drag this model around, and it's going to drag all 3 parts along with it because it's all contained inside of one model. Now let me show you what a folder does. So if we click on the plus sign and insert a folder like this, and let's say we take all 3 of these parts. I'm going to select the first part, and I'm going to hit Control while selecting the other 2 parts like this, and I'm going to drag it inside of the folder. So within this folder, we can still select the folder and drag it around like so, but if we go into the game and we select one of these parts, then it's going to individually select one of these parts, or at least when we hover over it, to then move it around if we want to do so, just like this. So that's like a slight difference between a folder and a model. But generally what I would say is you should use a model if you want to group parts together to make up one big part. But a folder can be more generalized and can be used to organize parts, scripts, and other sorts of assets you can use inside of your game. So that's like a short introduction to models and folders. But why is this important? Well, this is going to be important to understand the parent and child relationship when we're using these two functions inside of our game. So what I'm going to do is select these parts again, and I'm going to move it back into our model, and I'm going to delete this folder. So the first function I'm going to show you is find first child. And what we're actually going to do is insert a script, not inside of the workspace, but let's insert a script inside of the model that we just created. So I'm going to hit the plus sign next to model, and I'm going to insert a script. Okay, and I'm going to delete this code that's inside of here, and now what we're going to do is first locate our model. But what's interesting about this is because we have our script inside of the model, we actually don't need to locate the model from the game data model and then into the workspace and then into the model itself. So what we would have done is we would have said local and then the name of the model, which we can just call model like this. We're going to set this equal to game.workspace.model. We don't need to do it like this, but instead we can do it from the script itself. So if we were to actually delete this, we start at where the script is located. So in all lowercase, we're just going to say script, which basically tells us that we are currently located inside of the script right now. And we want to get the parent of this script, which is going to be the model. So we can just say script.parent, and this is going to locate the model rather than doing game.workspace.model just like this. Both of these basically do the exact same thing because we put the script inside of the model as a child. So now that we've come to that understanding, let's locate, let's say, the first part here. So what we're going to do is drop a line, and then we're going to say local part1 equals model.part1. So this is how we've been able to locate parts or other objects within the game. It's basically by using a dot and then whatever the name of the object is. But now this is where the first function comes in, which is find first child. And let me show you what this looks like. So instead of saying dot part1, we're actually going to delete this, and we're going to replace this with colon find first child, open and close parentheses. And inside of these parentheses, we're going to put the name of the part that we're trying to look for. So in quotations, we're going to say part1. Now, why are we doing it like this instead of doing dot part1 like we've been doing in the past? Well, let's say in this case, we have a script that's trying to look for a part that's contained within this model. Let's say this part is not here. So if we were to just delete this part and it's just gone from the model, then the script is going to try to look for a part called part1 that's in the model. But part1 is not here. So the script is going to throw in an error saying that there is no such thing called part1 if we were to just locate part1 inside of the model. But what this function does with find first child is it's going to check the model for a part1. And if there's no part1, then it's just going to tell us that, and we can handle the error if that ever comes to be the case. So what I'm going to do is hit Control Z as in zebra so we can bring the part back. And I'm going to go back to the script. And what we're going to do down here is check if part1 actually does exist. So we're going to say if part1, then we're going to, let's say, do something with this part, like change the brick color of it. So we're just going to say part1.brickColor equals brickColor.new, open and close parentheses. And inside of these quotations, we can pick a random color here. I'm just going to say cocoa, and then we can hit enter like that. So if we go into the game and hit test and hit play, then what we should see inside of the game is part1 has changed its color because the script was able to find part1 within the model. Now, once again, this is just a safety precaution to let us know that if the script decides to not find the first part, then it's just going to skip this if statement and it's just going to continue with the script as is without throwing an error inside of the output. I hope that part has made sense to you. So if we hit stop and we basically delete the first part, and if we go into the game now, then it's not going to throw in an error, but it's also not going to change the part of part1 because obviously there's no part1 inside of the model. So it's a safety precaution to be able to look for something if it doesn't exist, because there's a chance that it won't exist. And that is the purpose of find first child, and I hope that this has made sense to you. So now what I'm going to do is hit stop, and I'm going to hit Control Z again to bring the part back. And now let me introduce to you the second function that's going to be useful, and that's called wait for child. Now basically what this does is it lets Roblox wait to look for a specific object within a game for a specific period of time. And if it doesn't look for it, then it's just going to skip it and it's going to continue the rest of the code if it did not look for it. And we can handle the script accordingly to whether Roblox was able to find it or not. So what this is going to look like is, let's say we drop 2 lines and we were to look for part 2. So we're going to say local part2 equals model colon wait for child, just like this, open and close parentheses, and we're going to specify part 2 inside of here. Now, basically, what's going to happen is Roblox is going to run the script and it's going to look for if part 2 exists within this model, which in this case, it actually does exist once we join into the game. So once we do that, then we're just going to, let's say, make a print statement saying part 2 has been detected, just like this. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is immediately it says part 2 has been detected because it's contained within the model that we created. But let's hit stop and let me show you what happens if we delete the part and then bring it in after a certain period of time. So what I'm going to do is take this part and I'm going to right click and hit cut so that it's contained within our clipboard. And what I'm actually going to do is go to test and click this drop down and hit on run so that all we're going to see is our camera. So once we see this, then it's going to say in the output after a certain period of time that it says that there's a warning that says infinite yield possible on waiting for part 2 because Roblox took a while to try and see if part 2 existed, but in this case it actually didn't. So if we go into the workspace and we go into the model, so I'm going to right click the model and I'm going to hit paste into just like this. And now it's going to say that part 2 has been detected because we used the wait for child function to see whether the part was actually going to be detected. And since it was added to this model, that's when we decided to continue executing the script because of it. And it's very useful for situations like this if we're trying to wait for something to be added into a model or into the game itself. So that is basically how we use wait for child and also how we use find first child inside of our game. If something in this video didn't make sense to you, then I encourage you to rewatch some of the bits before we move on to the final part of this video, which is going to be a practical example of using find first child. So now what I'm going to do is hit stop, and I'm also going to hit Control Z to bring part 2 back. So for this last part of the video, we're going to be making what's called a kill brick. And basically what this does is if, let's say our player was in the game and we decided to step on this part, the part would kill us and it would basically reset our character. Kind of like if we were to play an obstacle course and if we touch a part that we shouldn't be touching, then it basically kills our character, and that's what's called a kill brick. And we can use what we learned in the last episode with the touched event and also combining it with find first child to make a kill brick. So that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do for the rest of this video. So what I'm going to do is go to the model and we're going to insert a part like this, and we can change the brick color of this to red so that we can say that this is a kill brick. And we're going to go to the right side and we're going to rename this part to kill brick, and then we're gonna hit enter. So what I'm going to do is insert a script inside of the kill brick. So I'm gonna hit the plus sign and I'm going to insert a script just like this. I'm going to delete this code, and we're first going to make reference to the kill brick, which once again, we can do from the script that's inside of this kill brick. So we can say local kill brick equals script. So we're located inside of the script, and then we're going to say dot parent just like this. And now we're going to use a touched event for this kill brick. So we're going to say kill brick dot touched colon connect function open and close parentheses. And then we're going to specify the other part that's inside of here, and then we're going to hit enter just like this. So what we need to do in order to detect if this is a player that's touching this kill brick is we need to find what's called a humanoid. So I'm just going to demonstrate to you what this humanoid is really quickly by going to test, and we're going to hit the drop down, and then we're going to hit play. So if we go into the game and go to the workspace and go to our character, which is our Brawl Dev character or whatever character your name is inside of the game, we're going to open this up and we're going to see that there is an object here called humanoid. And this humanoid is basically used to tell us that this is a player that's stepping on this part rather than just another random part stepping on this. So we're going to be detecting this using find first child. So what we're going to do is hit stop, and we're going to go back to our script that we created. So we're going to locate the humanoid of this part. So we're going to say local other part equals. Oh, and there's one more thing I forgot to mention too, is that so if we're inside of the game and we're stepping on this part, let's say, most likely we're using our right foot or our left foot to be stepping on this part. And as you can see, with the part that's touching this kill brick part, we can locate the humanoid that is basically contained within our Brawl Battle character. So the way we can do this is we can actually go to our script. If we hit stop and we go to our script like this, we can find the humanoid using the other part by saying local humanoid equals other part dot parent colon find first child open and close parentheses, and we're going to say humanoid just like this. So basically when we have our other part, which is going to be like our right foot or our left foot, we're going to get the parent of that, which is going to be our character data model. And then from there, we're going to find a humanoid inside of that player data model. So then once we make this check, we're going to say if humanoid, then we're going to set the health of the humanoid equal to 0 to essentially kill the player. So this is a property of humanoid, which we're basically just going to say humanoid.health equals 0. So health is a property of humanoid. for the character, and if we set it equal to 0, then that's going to kill the player. So now if we go into the game and hit play, so our character should be inside of the game, and if we touch this part, then it's going to kill our player like so. So that is basically how we make a kill brick, and we can also make sure that a character is touching this kill brick and not any other random part inside of the game. So that is basically how we use find first child and wait for child inside of our game, and I encourage you to experiment with find first child and wait for child for any other parts or any other functionality that you may think of for this challenge. So for today's learning objective, I want you to continue experimenting with that, and once you do that, I want you to go down to the comments section and paste in your code for other people to see that you are comfortable sharing, and that is basically going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Brawldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about random. So I want you to imagine that we have a 6-sided die, and when we roll this die, it's going to land on a number between 1 and 6. We can't control what number this lands on, and it's left completely up to chance as to whether we know what number this is going to land on. Like if I were to, let's say, pick a number like 4, and we were to predict that this die is going to land on the number 4, we have about a 17% chance that this is actually going to happen. And this is the concept of randomizing, which applies to game development as well. Like let's say we're playing Pet Simulator X and we're trying to hatch an egg. The pet that we get has a random chance of giving us a higher rarity compared to the normal common pets or the uncommon pets. Like if we were to get a legendary or something, that has a higher rarity than if we were to go for something that's simpler. Or if we were to play an RNG game, then it's going to pick out a bunch of different items with different rarities for us to obtain after we roll something. And so that is something that's important to know about when it comes to game development on Roblox, leaving stuff up to chance and adding randomization to it. And so that's what I'm going to be teaching you how to do inside of this episode, which is math.random. So what we're going to do is go on the right side of the Explorer, we're going to hit the plus sign and insert a script. We're going to call the script random just like this, and we're going to hit enter. So I'm just going to delete this, and I'm also going to get rid of any additional tabs that we're not going to be using. Okay, so what is math.random? It's basically a function that Roblox has given to us that can return a random number within a range that we provided. So the way this is going to be structured is we're first going to make a random number variable. So we're just going to say local random number, just like this. And we're going to set this equal to math. So it's going to look like this. Math is basically the library that we're going to be using that has the random function. So then we're going to say dot random, and this is all in lowercase too. So once we do this, then we're going to put open and close parentheses. And inside of here, it takes two numbers. So it has a range with a minimum value and a maximum value. So whatever minimum value we give it and whatever maximum value we give it, Roblox is going to pick a number between that range, and it's going to return it to the random number variable as we have over here. So let's make the minimum value, let's say 1. And then we're going to separate this with a comma for the second argument, which is going to be 6. And 6 is included with this as well, so it is going to pick a number between 1 and 6. And so what we're going to do down here is drop a line, and we're going to print the random number just like this. So whenever we join into the game and we fire this math.random function, it's going to automatically give us a different number every time we join into the game, but sometimes we can be lucky and Roblox will give us the same number consecutively. Okay, so we're going to go into the game, and it says that it picked out 2. So if we stop it and then play again, it's going to pick 5. And so if we stop it and then play it one more time, then it's going to pick a different number, which is 6. So you get the idea at this point. Every single time we call the math.random function with the provided range, then it's going to return a random number within that range. So that is how we use math.random inside of our scripts. But now let's do something interesting with math.random. So what if we wanted to do something like change the base plate's color, but to a random color every single time we join into the game, or if we were to throw this inside of a loop or something like that? We can actually do that by picking out random number values to put that as the color. And so if we were to basically select the base plate over here, and we selected this color over here, so in the past, we've worked with changing the brick color, but there's actually another property that does the same thing, which is color. And this takes in 3 numbers to change the color rather than having a brick color object. So if we select this, then we can see this color wheel that basically allows us to change the color of something based on numbers itself. So if we were to pick a random number between 0 and 255 for the red, green, and blue value, then we can have a random color every single time. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to hit cancel, and we're going to go to our random script. We're going to delete this code that we have here so far. And what we're first going to do is make reference to the baseplate by saying local baseplate equals game.workspace.baseplate, just like this. And then we're going to make a while loop by saying while true do, and then hit enter. So basically, while true do, this is what's called an infinite while loop. And generally, I don't recommend using this because this is going to run throughout the entire duration of the game, since this conditional is always going to be true. But just for the sake of demonstration purposes, this is what I'm going to be doing. So when we're using math.random to pick a random color, we need to have a red value, a green value, and a blue value. And we want to pick a random number from 0 to 255 for each of these values. So we're going to have 3 separate variables for each of them. So we're going to say local red value equals math.random, open close parentheses. And then for the minimum, we're going to put 0, and then for the maximum, we're going to put 255. Now for the green value, we're going to say local green value equals math.random, and then in parentheses, we're going to put 0 and then 255. And then finally, for the blue value, like this, we're going to set this equal to math.random, and then 0, 255 is the range. So now that we have the red, green, and blue value, let's change the baseplate's color. This might not make sense to you, so I want you to follow what I type here when we're changing the color value of the baseplate. So what we're going to do is say baseplate.color equals color3.from RGB, open and close parentheses, and then what we're going to put inside of here is the red value, comma, green value, comma, blue value, just like this. So this takes a color3 object, and we're passing in the 3 color values that we created randomly with math.random. And in order to see these changes, what we're going to do is put in a wait statement, and we need to make sure we do this. Otherwise, this is going to execute very, very quickly, and it's going to crash our script. So we need to put in a task.wait for, let's say, about 2 seconds. And now if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is the baseplate's color changing every single time that 2 seconds have been passed. So if we go into the workspace and then click on the baseplate, we can look down at the color property with a random red, green, and blue value that's being updated every 2 seconds. And so this is how we use math.random effectively inside of our game. Now, this is just a simple example, but obviously you can do a lot more with math.random. Like, let's say you were playing a matchmaking system and it was picking a random map for the players to play for the next match, then that's what math.random can be used for. There's a lot of useful things you can do with it, but this is just one simple example I'd like to throw out there for you to use. Okay, now there are some things that we should know about math.random, like the ranges itself. So if I were to drop 2 lines down here, and if I were to have another random value by saying local random number equals math.random, open and close parentheses, it's actually possible to mess up the range if we have a minimum value that's larger than the maximum value. So what I'm trying to get at here is if we have a maximum value of, let's say, 50, and if we were to have a minimum value of, let's say, -20, then this is not going to be a valid range because the minimum value has to be smaller than the maximum value. And another thing is you can have negative values as a minimum value as well. So if I were to basically comment out this code right here, so I'm just going to quickly go up here, comment out the code just like this by doing the double slashes and hard brackets and then having 2 end brackets by the end here. If we were to try and print the random number now by going into the game and hitting play, then it's going to say that invalid argument to number 2 to random, interval is empty. The interval is empty because this is not a valid interval, and we need to make sure that the minimum value is smaller than the maximum value when we're using math.random. So that's a little something I wanted to add in there when you're using math.random. So that's basically going to be it for this episode. For today's learning objective, I want you to play around more with using math.random. For your scripts, whether that's changing the base plate's color again to something else for a specific range, or you could change other properties like transparency from 0 to 1 and all these other sorts of things. Now, there's one quick thing I forgot to mention, and that is you can have math.random be an empty interval just like this, and it's going to pick a random number between 0 and 1 by default. So it's going to pick a decimal number. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is a random decimal number inside of here that's being picked from 0 to 1. So that's another useful thing you can use if you're trying to create something random using math.random without a range. So that's a little something I wanted to add. Once again, once you finish with the challenge, then I want you to go down to the comment section, paste in your code so that other people can see your code that you feel comfortable sharing. And that's basically going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Brawldev, and in this episode we'll be discussing about player stats. Okay, so for most Roblox games that you've played, you've probably seen something on the top right of the screen that shows a leader stat full of all the players that are playing within the game. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's go to test and then we're going to hit play. So on the top right of the screen, we should see a list of all the players that are currently within this game right now. But also, there are some games on Roblox that actually shows stats next to the player's name that can be seen by every other player that's in the game right now. So things like how long the player's been playing. The game for, or other things like the currency that they have, like whether it's coins or gems or whatever it is, you can see it next to each player that's within the game. And this is what's called player stats, which is something we're going to be implementing inside of Roblox Studio. And I think this is something all beginners should know how to implement, because it's also a very useful feature to know how to implement as well. So that's what we're about to be doing. Now, before we get into implementing, there's a few things we need to know about first before we do that. So I'm just going to hit stop. And the first thing we need to understand is creating instances within a script. Now, just to recap, an instance is basically any object that's contained within the game. So it doesn't matter if it's in workspace or inside of server script service or server storage, it doesn't really matter. An instance is literally just any object that's inside of the game. So it can be this script, or it could even be this script, or even this script. It can be the spawn location, it could be this model, it could basically just be anything. So we're creating instances and we're putting them inside of the game, and the way we've been doing them is by hitting the plus sign next to wherever we wanted to create an instance, and then we just search up whatever instance type we want to insert into the game. But what if I told you we can actually create instances within a script so that we can create stuff while the game is running? Because if we were to do it like this, then we can only create instances before the game actually runs. But if we do it inside of a script, we can create instances while the game's running. So I'm going to be showing you how this works inside of Studio really quickly. So I'm just going to create a script inside of Workspace by hitting the plus sign, inserting a script just like this. I'm going to rename this to player stats, like that. And I'm also going to disable the random scripts that we created in the last episode. Just going to delete this. And so the way we create an instance, let's say we wanted to create a part. We're going to first create a variable by saying local new part equals. And the way we do this is we use what's called instance. So we have an uppercase I, and then we say instance dot new. So this is the constructor we're going to be using to create a new part instance. So we're going to put open and close parentheses, and then inside of here, it takes in a string, which is basically the class name that we want to add to the game, which is going to be a part like this. So as you can see, we can create a lot of instances, but what we want to create is a part in this case. So we've now created a new part inside of the script, but right now it's not located anywhere because we didn't specify a location for this new part. So what we have to do is drop a line, and we have to say new part.parent. So parent is basically, where do we want this part to be a children of, or which folder do we want to put this new part in? In this case, we can put it inside the workspace folder by saying new part.parent equals game.workspace, just like this. Now, there are some other things we can do with this before we set the parent of this thing. So we can add some more configurations, like changing the name of the new part by saying new part.name equals, in quotations, we're probably just going to say new instance part, like this. And so now what we should see is if we go into the game, hit test and hit play, then we should see the new instance being created and be put inside of the workspace folder. So if we scroll down, then we can see the new instance part is here, but it's kind of located down here. So I'm just gonna like move this up a little bit. But here we go. This is how we create new instances within our game using a script. It doesn't resort to just using a part, but we can create anything we want inside of a script. Now, the second piece of information we need to know is using instanced data types. Now, basically what I'm referring to is if we go to our script and recap what a data type is, it's basically different types of data, as the name suggests, that we can use inside of our scripts, but also in the game in general. So we have things like strings that basically just make up a bunch of characters. Then we have numbers, and then we also have booleans like true and false and all these sorts of things. We can basically take these data types and use them as if they were instances within the game itself. So here's what I'm referring to. If we go into the game and we click on the plus sign in workspace, we can search up whatever data type we want. So we can say, let's say string, and it's going to say a string value we can insert inside the workspace. So if I click that, then it can show down here, if we select it, that there's a value property inside of this string value. So we can change this to whatever string we want by saying, I don't know, hello world or something, and this is the value of the string. Now we can do other things like insert a number value like this. So this is a number value that takes in a number for the value instead of a string. So this one can be, I don't know, 100, and then we can do the same thing with a boolean. So if we say bool value like this, then this takes in a check mark for the value. So it's either true or false, just like that. And you basically get the idea. So these are in an instance format, so it's not restricted to just having them be used inside of a script. And this is going to be important to know when we're going to be adding leader stats inside of the game. So now that we understand that, there's one more thing we need to understand, and that is the players folder. So if we hit play, then we've mostly just been working with the workspace folder inside of this tutorial guide. But now I want to introduce to you the players folder, which basically shows all the player objects that are currently within the game. So as you know, there's me that's in the game right now. And if we open up our player, there's 4 things here that's actually very important to know about. The first one being backpack, which is basically any item we have here in the hotbar. Then we have starter gear, which I'm not going to worry too much about right now. Player GUI, and then player scripts. So we have all of these things, and in order for us to add leader stats to our player, we need to add them inside of our player in the players folder. The difference here is that this is our player object, but if we go into the workspace, this is our player character. So this is our player character, which is inside the workspace, and this is our player object inside of the players folder. So now let's hit stop. So we now know everything we need to make player stats. So what we're going to do now is go back to our script. I'm going to select everything and then delete it. So what we want to do is basically create a leader stats folder for every single player that joins into the game. And the way we're going to do that is by first writing a player added event by saying game.players.player added connect function, open and close parentheses, and we're going to pass in a player argument, and then we're going to hit enter, just like this. And what we need to do first is create a leader stats folder inside of each player so that whatever value we put inside of here is going to show up on the right side of the screen. So what we're going to do is add a folder called leader stats. So what we're going to do is say local leader stats equals instance.new, open and close parentheses, and what we're going to put inside of here is a folder. So this is the new instance we're going to create. And then what we're going to do is rename this folder that we just created. So we're going to say leader stats.name equals. Now this is going to be very important. We have to make sure that the name of this leader stats is exactly leader stats in all lowercase, just like this. Otherwise, Roblox won't know that this is the leader stats folder that's going to be added to the player. Next thing we're going to do is change the parent of the leader stats folder to be inside of the player. So we're going to say leader stats.parent equals player, just like this. So if we go into the game and hit play, what should happen is we look at our player, and once we open this up, we can see that there's now a new leader stats folder instance that was put inside of our player. So now what we can do is put any data type instance inside of this folder, and it'll show up right here on the top right of the screen. So I'm going to hit stop, and then we're going to go back to our script. And for the first example, let's create a coins value. So what we're going to do is say local coins equals instance.new, open and close parentheses. Now you have to look for the right value that we're trying to add here, which is going to be an int value in this case. So int value is basically just whole numbers that we're going to be using. So this is how we create it. And now what we're going to do is set the name of the coins. So we're going to say coins.name equals coins, just like this. And then we're also going to set a default value of it as well. So we're going to say coins.value equals 0. Now we're saying coins.value because if we were to look at our number value that we created here, we're trying to set the value property. We're not trying to set the instance itself. So once we do that, let's now set the parent of coins. So we're going to say coins.parent. We're going to put this inside of the leader stats folder, just like so. So we're going to say leader stats like that. And now if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is our coins leader stat inside of the leaderboard. So if we go into players, go to our player, go to the leader stats folder, we can see that we now have our coins int value. And if we were to change this value right here, so if we were to select this and then change it to, let's say 10, then we can see that it's changing right here on the top right of the screen. Now, I don't encourage you to change it directly like this, just for like server and client reasons, but we're going to be learning about that in my advanced scripting tutorial guide, so you don't really have to worry about that right now. But this is essentially how you add leader stats inside of your Roblox game. So I'm going to hit stop, and what we can do here is, let's say we wanted to have a loop that basically increments the value every single second. So our coins go up by 1 every single second. What we can do is drop a line or drop 2 lines down here and have a while true do statement by saying while true do, and then we're going to hit enter. Make sure that we have a task.wait for any amount of time. It can be like 1 second, just so that this doesn't infinitely run and then crash our script. And now what we're going to do is increment the coins value. So what we're going to do is say coins.value equals coins.value plus 1, just like this. Now you have to make sure that it's coins.value and it's not the coins instance itself. The reason we do coins.value is because we're trying to set the value property to whatever it is that it's going to be, not the coins instance itself. Because if we were to do the coins instance itself, like let's say if we got rid of the value right over here and we started hitting play, then it's going to say that it's trying to perform arithmetic add on instance and number because we need to add the value, which is a number, not the coins instance. So I'm going to hit Control Z twice so that we can have the coins.value again. And now let's hit play and see what happens. So as you can see, after every single second, the coins value is being incremented by 1 every single time. And that's basically what we wanted to do with this script. So that is basically how you use player stats inside of your game. For today's learning objective, what I want you to do is you can create more instances if you want by either creating a Boolean value or by creating a number value or even a string value as well, and add them to the leader stats folder. And once you do this, I want you to go down to the comments section and paste in your code so that other developers can see what you've been doing that you feel comfortable sharing. So that's basically going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Braldev, and if you've made it this far into the series, well, first of all, shout out to you for making it this far, but second, I have good news for you. This is the final new concept we're going to be learning inside of this tutorial guide, and I'm going to go more into detail about this later, but essentially in the next episode after this one, we're going to be taking everything we've learned and putting it all into our first game that we're going to be creating. And before we can do that, I need to teach you this last concept, which arguably is the hardest one in the series, and it's also going to be the longest one in the series. So this one's gonna require your full attention, and I hope that you're gonna be able to understand this concept by the end of this episode. So what are we gonna be learning for this final concept? Well, I'm gonna be teaching you tables and how to use them inside of your Roblox games. So what is a table? It's basically a data structure that holds multiple pieces of data together all inside of one sort of collection. So it's when you take multiple pieces of data with different data types, you put them together so that you can manipulate them or move them around or even access them as you so desire to, all contained within one collection or one table or one group or however you want to call it inside of your script. And there's 2 types of tables that I'm going to be teaching you inside of this video. One of them is arrays and the second one is dictionaries. So if we were to go to the Explorer and then we inserted a script inside of the workspace, I'm going to rename the script to tables and I'm going to hit enter just like this, and I'm also going to delete the code here. Okay, so the first one I'm going to be teaching you is arrays. Now, basically what an array is is it's a table where we group values together in sequential order. And it's just going to be values that we're going to be storing inside of a table, and that's all it is going to be. So if I were to show you what this looks like, let's first create a variable. So I'm just going to call this one local my array, just like this. And then we're going to set this equal to a new syntax that I haven't showed you before, because this one is going to be specifically for creating tables. So what we're going to do is write down the open and close curly brackets just like this. So we're not going to be using open and close parentheses like we have been in a lot of the tutorials in the past, but instead we're going to be using open and close curly brackets to indicate that this is going to be a new table that we're going to create. And right now this table is empty because we haven't put values inside of it. So let me show you how to add values inside of this array. So what we can do is basically put down whatever value we want, and this can be of any type. It can be a number, it can be a string, just like this, or it could even be a Boolean as well. It doesn't really matter what it is, but let's say for our first value we put inside of here, it can be a number 10, just like this. Now, if we want to add another value to this, we separate each value we add with a comma, just like this, and then we add something new, like a string. We can do the same thing with adding a Boolean, and we could probably add another number as well, like, I don't know, 500 or something. And so now we have 4 values inside of this table. Now, what's interesting about an array is, first of all, we're just adding values inside of this table. But second, the way we access values is also in sequential order from the left side all the way to the right side. So it's important to know how to access values inside of an array, and that's by using their positional value of where they're located inside of the table. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, if we started at 10, this is essentially at position 1 inside of the table. And if we were at this string value, it's at position 2 inside of the array. This one's at position 3, and then this one's at position 4. So it goes from left to right, just like this. Now, if we were to access a specific value inside of this array, then we would drop a line just like this. We'll make a print statement. And then what we're going to do is, let's say we want to access the first value inside of here. Then what we're going to do is first write down the array just like this, say my array. And then we're going to add in open and close hard brackets just like this. So it kind of looks like a square just like this, because what we're going to put inside of here is a positional value that's going to essentially look through the table, finds the value that's inside of the position, and then it's going to return it. So in this case, we're going to look at position 1. So this is what we're going to put inside of here. So it's going to go through the table and it's going to look for position 1, and it's going to return 10, and it's going to print that. So if we go into the game, hit test and hit play, then what we should see in the output is the number 10, because the array was successfully able to look for whatever value was inside of position 1. And we can do the same thing with, I don't know, position 3. And if we go to the game and hit play, then it's going to return true because that's what was in the third position. I hope this is making sense so far, and this is how we're essentially able to access and use arrays inside of our game. Now, what if we wanted to print out every single value that's inside of this array? Well, we're basically just going to use a for loop. So what I'm going to do is comment out this print statement. I'm going to drop 2 lines, and then we're going to make a for loop. So what we're going to do is say for, and then we can call this counter variable the index, just like this. And we're going to set this equal to the first position of the array, which is always going to be 1. And then we're going to space this out with a comma. And then the max value is going to be the number of elements that are inside of our array, which in this case is going to be 4. Now, we could say 4, but there's actually a better way of doing this, because what if we change the value of this every single time? Oh, and by the way, I forgot to hit stop. My apologies on that. If we were to add another value really quickly, just like this, then this is going to be 5 elements instead of 4, and we're going to have to constantly come back and update this value every single time. So there's actually a better way of doing this that can automatically update the end value for however many elements we have inside of here, and that is called using a hashtag symbol or a pound symbol. So what it's going to look like is basically this, and we're going to put down my array. So essentially what's happening here is we're taking the array and we're using a hashtag or pound symbol before it to basically give us the number of elements that are inside of this array. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 elements inside of here. So this is going to return 4. So that's a better way of getting the number of elements inside of an array. It's by doing it like this. So then we're going to say do, and then we're going to hit enter. Now we're going to make a print statement, and we're going to access my array just like this. And then inside of the hard brackets, we're going to put down the the index, because it starts at 1, and then once we go down this iteration, it's going to update this index to 2, and then it's going to go to the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one, and then it's going to print out every single one. So if we go to the game, hit play, then what we should see is every single value inside of the array being printed just like so, because that is how we iterate through all of the elements within an array. Okay, but this is how we print all the elements inside of an array using a for loop. But why can't we just print the array itself? So if I were to delete this and then just print out my array, there's a lot of technical reasons behind doing it like this. But if I were to show you what this looks like, if we go into the game and hit play, then it's going to show a table with a hash value that's contained within it. Now, again, this relates to a lot of backend stuff when it comes to creating objects and storing them inside of memory within the game. And I don't want to go into those technical details right now, but basically what you need to know is you can't print the array itself because the array is a table object. So it's not going to print out whatever's contained in the table itself, since we're just going to have to go through every single element in the array to print them individually instead. So that's just something quick I wanted to add, and that is basically the introduction to arrays. Now, Roblox has some very useful functions that can allow us to manipulate items in a table while the game is running. So if we were to, let's say, think of an example of when this would happen inside of an actual game, is if you were to unlock a pet inside of Pet Simulator X, or if you were to unlock a new aura inside of like an RNG game or something like that, then we have to add the new value to our inventory table. But that's like an oversimplified example I can give when it comes to those sorts of things. But the important thing we need to know about is being able to add and remove values from a table while the game is running. So I'm going to show you two methods that Roblox has for us within a infrastructure or a library that they have for us. So I'm just going to delete this piece of code over here. And we're first going to make a new table. So I'm going to say local my array equals, and then we're going to put in the open and close curly brackets just like this. So this represents an empty table. So what I'm going to do down here is drop 2 lines. And here's what we're going to do. So we're going to use Roblox's library called table in all lowercase just like this. And then when we hit dot, then there's going to be all these methods we can use. And the first one I'm going to show you is called table.insert. And this basically allows us to add values to this array that we have over here, or just any table in general. So we're first going to pass in the my array table, and then for the second argument, we're going to add a value that's going to be put at the end of this array. So at the end of this array, we can put down, let's say, the number 10. So if I were to basically explain what this does, this is an empty array right now, and if we were to see all the elements within this table, then it's going to start with nothing. But then if we use table.insert to insert a number to this array, then the only thing that's going to be here is going to be 10. So let's see what this looks like if we were to print out all of the elements within the array. So if I were to say for I, I'm just going to say I, which is short for index, and I'm going to set this equal to 1, comma, and then we're going to use the hashtag symbol, my array, just like this, and then we're going to say do, and then we're going to print out every single value that's going to be within the array, passing in the index counter variable, just like this. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it down here so we can see it twice. So if we were to go to the game and hit play, then what we should see is just the number 10, because when we tried to print the array the first time, there was nothing to print. And then we added 10, and this is what added more values to it. So if I were to hit stop and show you what this looks like, if we were to have a populated table beforehand before adding something else. So if I were to, let's say, have 10, 20, and 30 as the starting array, and if I were to insert, let's say, 40, then what's going to happen is it's going to insert 40 at the end of the table. Rather than at the beginning or in the middle or just somewhere random, it's going to put it at the end of the table. So if I were to hit play once again, then it's first going to start with 10, 20, and 30. But then it's going to print out the new table with 10, 20, 30, and 40 because it added 40 at the end of this array right here. And that is essentially how you insert new values inside of an array. So I'm going to hit stop. And now let me show you what happens if we try to remove a value. So I'm going to drop 2 lines once again, and I'm going to say table.remove just like this. And then inside of here, we're going to pass in my array. And now for the second argument, you have to be careful about this one because we passed in a value for the second argument for table.insert. But for table.remove, we're passing in an index, a positional value, to basically look for the value in this array that matches the position and it's going to remove it. So if I were to, let's say, put in 4, then it's going to check for the 4th position and then remove whatever values inside of there. So if we were to insert 40 beforehand, then it's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, and whatever's going to be on the 4th position, which is 40, that's what it's going to remove. Rather than 40, which is the value itself, it's going to remove whatever's at the 4th position, which is going to be 40. So now if I were to copy this once again and then paste it, then what we should see if we go into the game is first we're going to see 10, 20, and 30, then we're going to see 10, 20, 30, 40, and finally we're going to see 10, 20, and then 30. So that is how you use table.insert and table.remove to add and remove values from an array when you're working with them inside of the game, like while the game is running. The last thing I'm going to talk about with arrays is being able to search through values in the array and then look for specific values within them when we're looping through a script. So what I'm going to do is basically just delete all of these statements we have except for the very first line. And I'm going to add more numbers to this, like we could just say 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. So we're just going to go from 10 to 100. Now, if we were to loop through all of these values in the array, so if we were to say for I equals 1, comma, pound symbol, my array, do just like this. And then what we're going to do is basically write a conditional here by saying, if my array in hard brackets, then we're going to put down the index like so. So if my array with the index counter variable right there is equal to, let's say 50, then we're going to make a print statement saying 50 has been found, just like this. And then if we were to go into the game and hit play, then obviously it's going to say 50 has been found inside the table. But if we were to remove this, and if we hit play, then it's not going to print anything because we removed the 50 that we were trying to look for. Okay, now there's another way we can look for values within a table, and we don't have to use a for loop for this. So what I'm going to do is basically just comment out this block of code right over here, and I'm going to drop 2 lines. So what I'm going to do is write a simple function that Roblox has for us called table.find, open and close parentheses, just like this. And I'm actually going to wrap this in an if conditional as well. So I'm going to say if table.find, and then what we're going to put inside of here first is the array itself. And then for the second argument, we're going to put down whatever value it is we're trying to look for, which let's say it's 50. So if table.find my array 50, then we're going to print 50 has been found, just like this. And if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is 50 has been found. Now, the reason this is useful is because it also returns the index of where it was able to find this value. And if it didn't find it, then it's just going to return nil. So I could say something like local index equals, and then we could just copy this code we had over here, put it inside of here. And then we're going to say if index is not equal to nil, so this is basically the same thing as what we had previously, then it's going to say 50 has been found. But if you want to make it more simple, you could just say if table.find my array 50, it's going to return the index. But in this case, we don't really need the index, so that's why we could just keep it like this. Then it's going to say 50 has been found. So these two basically do the same thing. It's just a matter of preference of which one you want to do, and that is how you search through values in an array. So the next table type is a dictionary, and I'm gonna first show you this by quickly removing our comments that we had here, and I'm also going to comment out the remaining bits of code just so that we can have the array code as reference for our dictionaries. Okay, so what is a dictionary? Well, it's basically another type of table that allows us to search through values inside of a dictionary using a key. So when we attach a key to each of these values that's within the dictionary, so we can search up these values by using a key that we've attached to each one of these values. So I want you to imagine like a real life English dictionary where every single word that you see or every single term that you see has a definition attached to it. So if we were to look for a definition of a term, then we search up the term and then we get the definition of that term. So it kind of works the same way here if we're using a table. So if I was to show you how this would look like, we're basically going to create a new dictionary by, let's just say local, let's call this menu. So we're going to create a new menu with different items that we can order inside of this restaurant that we just, I don't know, created off the top of our head with a price associated with them. So what I'm going to do is say local menu, and we're going to set this equal to open and close curly brackets, just like we did with the arrays. But this time what we're going to do is for organization purposes and also for readability, we're actually going to drop a line like this. So this is still one table, but each single item that we add is going to be spaced out for every single line that we add inside of here. So here's how it's going to look like. There's 2 ways of writing keys, and this is the first way I'm going to show you. So we're basically going to write open and close hard brackets, and then we're going to put double quotations inside of here. And then we can put down whatever menu item name that we want inside of here. Like, let's say we want to add a cheeseburger, just like this. This is going to be the key, but now we're going to set this equal to a value on the right side, which let's say we're going to make this cheeseburger 15 bucks, just something as ridiculous as this. and then we're going to drop a comma, and then we're going to hit enter. So as you remember, the way we separate items is by using a comma. And so now we can add another item inside of here by basically putting in open and close hard brackets, and then we're going to put in the double quotations, and then we can add something else inside of here, like let's say cola. We're going to make this a $4 cola, just like this, and then now we have 2 items inside of here. And we can continue this trend by putting in other things in here, like, I don't know, we can put pancakes inside of here. We're going to set this equal to $8, and then we can add one more thing inside of here. Like, let's say we wanted to add good old milk, just like this. We're going to set this equal to 4 as well. So we've added in 4 entries inside of our dictionary. So this, whatever's on the left side is going to be our key, and then whatever's on the right side is going to be our value. Now, like I said, there's a second way of being able to write keys, and that's just by using the variable itself. So we could just say cheeseburger, just like this, and this is another valid way of writing it, but I'm going to show you more about this later on. So this is how we write one, and if we want to access a specific value inside of this menu dictionary, we're going to write a print statement, and then we're going to specify the menu, but this time, instead of specifying an index, we're going to specify the key that we're trying to look for, which in this case, it's going to be, let's say, cheeseburger. It's going to then return the value of this cheeseburger, which is going to be $15. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is the number 15 inside of the output, because we were successfully able to look for the value given the key that we gave it. So if we hit stop, if we were to, let's say, print multiple values, so if we were to say menu, and then inside of here, we're going to say cola, and then we're going to space this out again by saying menu, and then inside of here, we're going to say milk. And if we go into the game and hit play, then we should see all the prices for each of the items that we searched for inside of this dictionary. So we have 15, 4, and then 4 again. So that is how you access values inside of here. Now, once again, there's another way of writing keys. So I'm just going to comment out this part of the code, and I'm going to just write down the menu again by saying local menu equals open, close curly braces, and then we're going to hit enter just like this. So we can say cheeseburger as a variable, and then we're going to set this equal to 15, and then we can add another one like cola. We're going to set this equal to 4. So I'm just going to add 2 of these really quick. So now, if we were to access these variables, we're going to just simply say menu dot whatever the variable is, which is going to be cheeseburger, and this is going to do the exact same thing. So if we go to hit play, then it's going to print out the value, which is 15, since that is the price of a cheeseburger. So these are 2 ways you can write dictionaries, and I hope you found this part to be useful. Now, one more thing I would like to add is we can modify values in the dictionary that we create. So I'm just gonna hit stop really quick. I forgot to do that. And I'm just going to comment out this block of code we have over here, and I'm going to uncomment what we had up here with our previous menu. So what we can do here is we can actually manipulate values given the key that we give it. So what we can do is say menu, and then inside of the hard brackets, we can specify what the key we're trying to modify is. So we can say, let's say cheeseburger. We can change the price of this cheeseburger to something different. Like, let's say we change this to $5 instead of 15. Then if we were to access this value inside of the game now, so if we were to go to the game and hit play, then it's going to say 5 instead of 15 because we were able to change the value just like this. And we can basically do the same thing with the other way we created the dictionary. So if I were to comment this out one more time, and if I were to uncomment this part, we can basically just say menu.cheeseburger equals 5 just like this, and it's going to do the exact same thing. If we go into the game, then it's going to print 5 just like that. And so that is how we use dictionaries inside of our scripts. So we know how to use for loop and also being able to use index values to iterate through a table, but there's actually a more conventional way of iterating through tables, especially with key value pairs, and that's with the use of pairs loops, which is going to be the final concepts we're going to be learning about inside of this tutorial guide, and this is going to be a very important one to know about. So what I'm going to do really quickly is delete the code that we've had at the end here, and I'm also going to uncomment the first dictionary creation we had over here with the menu. Okay, so what do I mean by pairs and iPairs loops? Well, basically, when we've been accessing items inside of our dictionary with the key and value, we've had the key, and then that would return we've had the key, and then that would return the value of whatever is going to be contained inside of this dictionary. But if you want to be able to access all the keys and all the values while we iterate through all of the items within a dictionary or just a table in general, we need to know how to use pairs and iPairs loop, because this is also useful if we're trying to iterate through multiple items within one object inside of the Explorer, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do, first with tables and then with models inside of our game. So what I'm going to do is basically just remove these 2 lines of code we have over here, and we have our menu currently right right here. But what we're going to do is say for, and we're actually going to create two variables with this pairs loop. So the first one is going to be a variable for the key. So we're going to say for menu item, just like this, and then comma, we're going to say whatever the variable of the right side is going to be, which is going to be the price. And then we're going to say in pairs, just like this. And then we're going to say open and close parentheses, and then we're going to pass in the menu dictionary like this, and then we're going to say do like so. So what's going to happen here is we have two variables. One of them is going to be for the key, and then the other one's going to be for the value, which is the price. And we're going to iteratively go through this dictionary in pairs with the menu item and also the price. So if we were to make a print statement by printing out the menu item along with the price just like this, and we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see in the output is every single item that's inside the menu with the price that's next to it. So this is how we're able to iterate through a table that gives us two variables. One of them is going to be the item and the other one's going to be the price. And that is basically how you make a pairs loop. Now you might have noticed that when we printed out all the items that are contained within the menu, it's out of order. It started with pancakes, then it went to cheeseburger, cola, and then milk. So the reason it went out of order is because when we're using pairs, it's going to pick the items inside of the dictionary inside of a random order, and it's just going to print out everything that's inside of there. That's why we need to use what's called iPairs, which is actually going to iterate through all of the items sequentially from where it is first created to where it is last created. And I'm going to be showing you this using the myArray that we created at the top of this code right over here. So what I'm going to do is comment out all of this code with the dictionary, and I'm going to uncomment everything that has to do with our array that's over here. I'm actually going to delete this part of the code right here. So if we're going to be iterating through all of the elements within this array, we don't necessarily need to use keys for this, but instead we're going to create an index variable. So what we're going to do is say for index, comma, and then we're going to say number in I pairs, just like this. And then inside of here, we're going to put my array, just like this. And then we're going to say do like that. So what we can do from here on out is just basically print out the index and also print out the number as well. So what's essentially going to happen here is, since we're using iPairs, it's going to start at the very beginning and it's going to go in sequential order all the way till the end. An index is going to be the position of where each of these items is going to be inside of this array. So it's going to be 1, 10, 220, 330, because it's going to print out the position and then it's going to print out whatever the value is for each item inside of the array. So if we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is 110, 220, 330, 440, 550, just like this. And this is how we use iPairs, and also how we're able to go through every item in sequential order. So now I'm going to hit stop, and that's basically how we use iPairs inside of our scripts. Now there's two more tips that I can give you that's very useful, and that is basically hiding variables that we don't need. So for this index instance, we can actually just use an underscore to basically say that we don't want this variable since we don't need it. And this is how we use a pairs or an iPairs loop if we don't want a specific variable. We can even do it with value as well, but I don't know why you would do that since we don't really need to do that. But usually this is helpful for indexes if you don't need the index when you're looping through a pairs. So this is just something I wanted to add in case you wanted to use this inside of your for loops, since I do use this quite a bit. And I'm going to show you how this is useful for what I'm going to show you last. So this is going to be the last thing we're going to be doing, and that is using a model and iterating through all the parts inside of the model. So what I'm going to do is take our model that we created from one of our previous episodes. I forgot which one it was. I think it was events. But basically, if you don't have a model like this, you could just quickly create one and add 3 parts inside of this model. And what I'm going to do is, well, first of all, I'm going to comment out all the code we have over here, and I'm going to make reference to our model that we created inside of the workspace. So I'm going to say local model equals game.workspace.model, just like this. And what I'm going to do is loop through every single item that's inside of the model. So I'm actually going to delete the script that we have inside of here, and we're going to iterate through all the parts that are in here. So we're going to say for, and we can say index, comma, and we can say part in pairs, just like this, open and close parentheses, and then we're going to say model. But model is a model data type. But what we want is a table full of all of the objects that are contained within the model. So what we can do is say get children, just like this, open and close parentheses, and then we can say do. Now get children basically returns a table full of every single child that is within the model parent, just like this. And so what we can do here is basically use all these parts to our advantage, and this is how we loop through models using pairs. So we can basically print out, let's say, the part.name for every single one of them. And this is how we can basically access multiple parts inside of a model that's grouped together within one table. And this is how we can use tables and pairs to basically manipulate whatever it is we want inside of our scripts inside of groups. So as you can see, it printed out part 3, part 1, and part 2, just like so. And we can do a whole bunch of other things like change the parts and also whatever it is we want to change within them. So that is basically everything that I have to offer for you for this tutorial guide. Now, we are not finished with the tutorial guide because in the next episode, we're going to be taking everything we learned inside of this tutorial guide and we're going to create our first game before we conclude this tutorial guide. And I'm very excited to see it. If you've made it this far into the tutorial guide, I can't thank you enough for watching through all these tutorials because you're learning a lot just from watching every single video and applying everything that you've learned inside of every video and then putting your code in the comments of all of the videos that you've been watching up until this point. You're learning a lot, and I'm excited to see what you're going to be creating with what I've taught you throughout this tutorial guide. So once again, for the final learning objective, well, this might be the final one or it might not be, I'm not really too sure. But for today's learning objective, I want you to take all of what you've learned with tables, whether that be through dictionaries or with arrays, and also with pairs and iPairs. I want you to do whatever you want to do with them. You're completely free with whatever you want, and take in whatever you learned throughout this entire tutorial guide inside of your code as well to make one final script. And I want you to take everything you've learned and put it inside of the comment section of this video so that other people can see it, and whatever it is that you feel comfortable sharing as well. I want you to share that to the world, just like I've been sharing my knowledge to you. So with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Welcome back to my Roblox beginner scripting tutorial series. My name is Brawldev, and this is the final episode of our beginner scripting tutorial guide. And if you've made it this far into the series, then huge respects to you, because I think a lot of people would have left by like the second or third episode. So the fact that you've made it this far means that you're really interested in being able to make a Roblox game and you're fully committed to making that happen, which I'm really proud of. So basically what we're going to be doing for this episode is we're going to be taking everything we've learned up until this point and we're going to create our first game, as I'm going to show you right over here. This is essentially going to be taking everything we've learned and we're going to create our first game by doing so. So I'm just going to show you what this game is if we hit play when we go to test. And basically what we have here is an obstacle course. Now, this obstacle course is a little unique compared to a traditional obstacle course or obby or whatever you want to call it. So first things first is we have these yellow balls over here where if we touch it, then it's going to increment our leader stat that we have up here called coins. And it's going to be a random number from like, I think 1 to 5, where if we step on it, then it's going to change our coins value to something between 1 and 5, and it's going to add that to our leader stat. And it's also going to make it transparent as well, just like this. But the main thing about this obstacle course is we have a button for each stage for this obstacle course. So if we step on it, then the gate at the end of it is going to open, and there's going to be a timer at the output showing how many seconds we have left before we make it across. So once we do make it across, then it's going to close the gate. And if you didn't make it in time, then you would have to go down and press the button again. So this is stage 2, which is basically the exact same thing, except we have a smaller time frame. So as you saw right there, I barely had enough time to actually get through that thing. And so we basically just continue from here on out. Every single stage we make is basically the same idea, where we press a button and then there's a certain amount of time that is going to pass before the gate closes on the other side. And so, in taking everything we've learned, we're going to recreate this obstacle course, but I highly encourage you to try making this game yourself first with everything you've learned before we start implementing it inside of this episode. So with that being said, if you've attempted to make this game by yourself, then we can go ahead and go straight into implementing. So I've loaded up a fresh base plate here, and it's completely up to you whether you want to create a new place by going to File and then hitting New for this episode, or you could just use the same game that you've been using throughout this entire tutorial guide. It's completely up to you. And one more thing I would like to mention is if there's at any point throughout the video where I'm speaking too fast, or if there's some parts of the video that just confuses you, then I encourage you to rewatch those bits. And you can even play the video in 0.75 times speed to make the video slower so that you can take in the information better. But once again, that's up to you. And now that I've addressed that, let's go ahead and create our first game on Roblox. So what we're going to do is go to the Explorer, hit the plus sign next to Workspace, and we're going to insert a model. Now with this model, we're going to rename this model to our main game, just like this. And then we're going to add folders to this main game, and there's 4 of them that we're going to need. So let's hit the plus sign, insert a folder just like this, and we're going to rename this folder to coins. So we're going to need one for coins, and what I'm going to do is right click and duplicate this, because we're also going to need one for the gates. And we're going to duplicate this again. We're going to need one for our buttons. And then finally, we're going to need one more for the stages themselves. So now that we have our folders, the next thing we're going to do is create all of the parts that we need to make up one stage. And those 3 being the gate, the button, and the obstacle course itself. So let's go into the home, and we're going to insert a part. So this part is going to resemble the button that we're going to be using for the first obstacle. So what I'm going to do is rename this part to, let's say, stage 1. And I'm going to go down, and I'm going to hit anchored so that it's not affected by gravity whenever we step on it. And then we're also going to change the brick color of this to like really red. And we can change the material of this to neon as well. And I'm also going to scale this down by clicking on the scale tool. And we're going to just scale this down like so. So now we have our stage 1 button that we have over here, and we can place this inside of our buttons folder just like so. Okay, so that's the first part, but next thing we need is our gate. So we're going to add another part like this, and we're going to call this one stage 1 as well. We're going to make this gate, let's say, some sort of green color like this. And we're also going to go down and check anchored once again. And we can just basically scale this up just like this so that it resembles a gate. And now we can drag this into our gates folder just like so. So now we have the button and the gate for stage 1. But now let's create the actual obstacle for stage 1. So what I'm going to do once again is insert a part just like this. We can scale this however we want, just like so. It doesn't really matter too much. And now that we have this, we're going to go down and we're going to hit anchored once again. And what I'm going to do for each stage is I'm actually going to insert a model. So inside of the stages folder, we're going to hit the plus sign and we're going to insert a model. And I'm going to call this stage 1 again. And I'm going to drag this part inside of stage 1. And now that we have this, I'm going to duplicate this part and I'm going to move it along this way, just like so, just so that we have some platforms over here. I'm going to duplicate the same thing just by going like this. I can even take these 3 parts and just duplicate it like so. And so we now have more to work with like this. And now that we have this, we have our first obstacle pretty much. So what we're going to do is basically take this part and we're going to duplicate it like this. And I'm also going to scale it just like so, so that we have a platform over here. And I'm just going to recolor this bit to some sort of blue. And now that we have this, we could basically take our gate. So if we select the gate on the Explorer and we select the move tool, then we can basically just move it up here like this. If we're able to just move it over here and we cover it up so that we can't bypass it like this, then that should basically be everything that we need. And we're also going to take our button and we're just going to move it over here so that it's at a reasonable spot. And now we basically have our setup for the first stage. So now that we have this, we're going to create a script and make the game functional. So what I'm going to do is actually go on server script service and I'm going to hit the plus sign and we're going to insert one in server script service. We're not going to do it inside of workspace, but we're going to do it inside of here instead. So I'm just going to delete the script that's over inside of here and we're going to create a couple of variables. So the first thing is accessing the main game. So we're going to say local main game equals game.workspace and we're going to use wait for child as well. So we're going to hit colon wait for child open and close parentheses. And then inside of here, we're going to say main game just like this. And then we're going to create more references specifically for the gates and the buttons. So what I'm going to do is say local gates equals main game colon wait for child open and close parentheses. And then in here, we're going to put gates. And then we're going to have one for the buttons as well. So we're going to say local buttons equals main game colon wait for child open and close parentheses. And then we're going to put down buttons just like so. Okay. Now, we have our gates and we have our buttons, but the thing we want to do with the script is we want to make this functional when we step on the button so that it can find the right gate that it's looking for so that it can open up the gate, so to speak. So what we need to do is basically access all of the buttons and then make them quote unquote pressable or touchable by the player. One thing I forgot to do is go to our script, and we're actually going to rename this to our main script, just like this, just for organization purposes. That's what we're going to do. So here's basically how we get a table full of all the buttons so that we can go through each of them so we can make them functional. What we're going to do is say for index, comma, button in pairs, open and close parentheses, buttons, colon, get children, open and close parentheses, do, and then we're going to hit enter. So basically we're going to use get children to get a table of all of the buttons that are inside of this buttons folder. And then we're going to use this button variable to make a touched event for each and every single one of them. Now for this index variable, we can actually just put an underscore because we're actually not going to use this key variable right here. So what we're going to do now is say button.touched colon connect function open close parentheses, enter. And we're also going to pass in the other part that we're trying to detect. And what we need is to check whether a humanoid touched it or not. So we're going to say local humanoid equals other part.parent colon find first child open close parentheses. And we're going to look for a humanoid. Then we're going to hit enter. And now what we're going to do is say if humanoid, then, and then we're going to hit enter just like this. Now, there's something we need to add to the button that I forgot to mention, and those are some instance variables that we're going to be using and changing inside of a script. So inside of our stage 1 button, we're going to hit the plus sign, and we're going to insert 2 values. The first one is going to be a Boolean, which is going to check whether this current button has been touched. So we're just going to rename this to touch just like this. And we're going to insert another value that's an int value just like this. And we're going to rename this to duration, which is going to be how long this gate is going to be open for. So we can say that this gate can be open for about 10 seconds. We're just going to change it to that. And we can leave the touched variable unchanged. And so what we're going to do is basically locate our touched variable that we have here. So we're going to say local touched equals button colon find first child open and close parentheses touched just like this. So now what we're going to do is say if humanoid and touched dot value is equal to false. Now the reason we're saying touched here is because we're trying to see if touched actually exists as a value. And then we're going to check if the value of touched, so this thing down here, if it's set equal to false, so it hasn't been touched yet. So if we're able to confirm all these things, then we can make the button pressable. So what we're going to do is we can actually create a new function and just put that inside of here. So what I'm going to do is declare a new function up here by saying local function activate button just like this. And then we're going to put an open close parentheses and then we're going to hit enter. So now we can pass in our activate button function down here. And there's actually a few things that we're going to pass in. So the first thing is going to be the button. And then the second thing is going to be the touched variable as well. So we're going to put in touch just like this. So then we're going to do the same thing up here by passing in button as a parameter, and then we're going to pass in the touched instance value as well. So now what we're going to do inside of this function is say touched.value is equal to true, and then we're going to locate the duration value as well. So what we're going to do is say local duration equals button colon find first child open and close parentheses duration just like this, and then we are now going to put a task.wait for however long the duration's value is. So we're going to say duration.value just like this, and then we are going to say touch.value is set back equal to false just like so. So we now have a button that activates, but now what we need to do is actually make the gate associated with this stage to be, I guess, open. So here's how we're going to do it. What we're going to do is basically locate the gate that we're looking for, and then we're going to open it up. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to say local gate equals gate colon find first child open and close parentheses. And what we're going to, oh, sorry, gates, that's what I meant to say. And then inside of here, what we're going to do is say button.name. And the reason we're doing button.name is because when we're looking for the stage 1 button, this is the name of the button. And if we go inside of the gates folder, we're trying to look for the same exact name so that we know that this is the stage gate that we're trying to look for. That's why we passed in button.name instead of looking for the specific name that we're looking for. So then once we find the gate, we're going to say if gate, then we're going to set the transparency of the gate. So gate.transparency is set equal to 0.5. And then we're also going to make the gate can collide set equal to false. So basically what can collide is, if we select gate, there's a property here called can collide. And when this is set equal to true, that means whenever our player is touching the part, then we can't pass through it. But if we set it equal to false, then that means the player can actually pass through the part. So that's what we're going to be doing here by saying gate.canCollide is set equal to false, just like this. And so this is how we basically open up the gate for the player to be able to walk through it. Now, after a certain period of time, we're going to have to basically take these variables and make the gate back to what it used to be. So we're going to select these two lines, we're going to copy it, and then we're going to paste it down here. So I'm going to make the transparency 0, and I'm going to set the can collide of this property back to true so that we now have a functioning script over here. Now, if we want to be able to print this out inside of the output, what we can do instead of a task.wait is write a for loop. Now, what we can do here is basically say local timer equals duration.value, just like this. And what we can do is write a while loop by saying while timer is greater than 0, we can say do timer equals timer minus 1. And then up here, we can say task.wait for about 1 second. And then we can even write a print statement at the very start here by basically telling us what the timer value currently is. So we print the timer, wait for 1 second, and then we decrement the timer variable by 1 until it reaches 1, or something that's not 0. So this is basically our entire main script right here. So if we go into the game and hit test and hit play, then we should basically see our first stage be functional. So if I press the button, then it's going to show down here that we have 10 seconds so that we can reach this stage, and we are now reaching the other side of this gate. And then once the timer has finished, then it's basically going to close up again, so you have to go back and press the same button again. So if we go back and press the button one more time, then it should be working just as expected. So now what I'm going to do is hit stop, and the next thing we're going to add is coins. So basically we're just going to go inside of model. We're going to, instead of creating a part, we're going to hit the drop down here, and we're going to create a sphere. So what we're going to do with the sphere is we're going to rename this to coin. We're going to set the brick color to some sort of yellow, and we're going to make the material to neon. And we're also going to set anchored equal to true, and we're also going to set can collide equal to false, just like this, so that the player can walk through it. And so now that we have this, we can basically just move this inside of our platform. I'm just going to put it somewhere here. I'm going to put it right here. So now that we have this, what we need to do is create a new script for our leader stats. So inside of service script service, we're going to hit the plus sign. We're going to insert a new script, and we're going to rename this one to player stats, just like this. And now what we're going to do is create a player added event. So we're going to say game.players.player added connect function, open and close parentheses. We're going to pass in the player argument, and then we're going to hit enter, just like this. So we're going to create a new leader stat for this player. So we're going to say local leader stats equals instance.new, open and close parentheses, folder. And then we're going to set the name of this folder. So we're going to say leaderstats.name equals, in all lowercase, we're going to say leaderstats like so. And then we're going to set the parent of this leaderstats folder to the player itself. And now we're going to add a coins leaderstat to this leaderstats folder. So we're going to say local coins equals instance.new, and then inside of here we're going to add int value, and then for the coins name we're going to say coins.name is equal to coins, just like this, and then we're going to say coins.value is set equal to 0, and then finally we're going to put the parent of this coins value to the leader stats, just like this. So now we've created our leader stats script right here. What we need to do now is basically take all the coins that are inside of this coins folder. So what I'm actually going to do is take this coin and move it inside the coins folder. So what I'm going to do is basically locate the coins that we're going to need for this script. So what I'm going to do is say local main game equals game.workspace wait for child, open close parentheses, main game, and then we're going to locate the coins folder by saying local coins equals main game wait for child, and then we're going to say coins, just like this. Now we're going to use another pairs loop for every single coin that we touch. So we're going to say for underscore comma coin in pairs. in parentheses, we're going to say coins colon get children, because we're trying to get a table of all the coins rather than the folder itself. So then we're going to say do just like this, and then we're going to add a touched event to the coin. So we're going to say coin.touched colon connect function, open close parentheses, enter just like this. And then we're also going to insert the other part as well. Now, one other thing we're going to add to this coins variable is by adding another Boolean value inside of our coin. And then we're going to rename this to touch just like so. So what we're going to do first is locate the humanoid once again. So we're going to say local humanoid equals other part dot parent colon find first child open close parentheses, and then we're going to add a humanoid just like this. Next thing we're going to do is we have to locate the player of this humanoid, because we need to be able to change the coin's value of the player based on the humanoid that we provided. And there's actually a function inside of players that allows us to do this. So I want you to copy exactly what I do. So what we're going to do is say local player equals game.players colon, and this function is going to be called get player from character just like this. And then inside of these parentheses, what we're going to do is say other part.parent, because we are passing in the character and we're trying to see if there's a player object that exists within the character, if that makes sense. So then what we're going to do is locate the touched variable by saying local touched equals coin colon find first child open close parentheses touch just like so. And now we're going to do our if statement. So we're going to say if humanoid and player and touched dot value is equal to false, then. So we need to make all 4 of these checks. And if every single check here is valid, then what we're going to do first is say touched dot value is set equal to true. And then what we're going to do is say player dot leader stats dot coins dot value is equal to the same thing here. So if we just copy this and paste it on the right side, +1. So basically what we're doing here is we take the player, we get the leader stats folder of the player, then we get the coins stat, then we update the value of it to whatever it currently is, and then we set it equal to 1. Now, if we want to make this more readable, what we can do is basically just delete this and then say plus equals 1. So it takes whatever the value of this is and it adds 1 to it just by using this simple compound operator just like so. So once we add the value to this, what we can do is we can visually change the coin itself by saying coin.transparency. Let's say we set this equal to 0.75, and now we basically have a finished game. If we go into the game and hit play, then what we should see is if we step on the button, then it's still going to be visible. And if we hit on this coin, then it says that it adds 1 to our coins. But there's one final touch that we need to add to this, and that is adding a random coins amount when we step on the button. So what we can actually do down here is say local random amount equals math.random, open and close parentheses, and then we're going to have a range of 1 to 5 just like this. And so once we do this, we're actually going to replace the 1 with the random amount just like this. So now if we go into the game and hit play, then it should give us a random amount when we step on this coin. So we step on it and it gave us 4 coins instead of 1. And if we step on this one again, then it's going to give us another random amount from 1 to 5. So we've now finished our very first game. Like, if you were able to catch up with me throughout this entire episode, then good on you for that. But one more thing that we can do is add another stage. And how we're going to do that is we're basically going to create another model by saying model over here. We're going to make stage 2 just like so. And then we can basically just take our part that was over here, we can duplicate it and then move it alongside this way. We can drag this inside of stage 2, and then we can add like a little obstacle course here by just duplicating and then moving it to the right side here, duplicating, move to the right side here. We can even take all 3 of these parts, duplicate it, and then move it alongside here again until we reach the other side. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this part that we have down here, just move it alongside this way. And we're also going to take this gate, we're going to duplicate it, we're going to rename this to stage 2, and then we're going to move it this way. So once we do that, then we can also take the button down here. So we're going to duplicate it and then move it up here. So we're going to move it up here just like this so that we have a button to press for the next gate. And I'm also going to rename this to stage 2 just like so. And that is how you add more stages to this obstacle course that we just created. So if we go into the game and we press the button, then we should be able to go into the next stage. And if we press this button, then it's going to open up the next gate that we're trying to look for. And so this is our final product. We can also duplicate this coin by moving it this way. We can even duplicate it again by moving it up here. And we can finally do it one more time just by moving it down here. And now we have a final game. If you were able to recreate this game while following along with this tutorial guide, then you should be proud of yourself. Like you were able to create your first game on Roblox with everything that you were able to learn from this entire tutorial guide. And this is definitely going to help you for when you go to the advanced scripting tutorial guide and even the GUI tutorial guide as well. And this is a long journey. Like I said, becoming a Roblox game developer is not easy. And if you're able to make your first game just by following this tutorial guide, then you're definitely ready for whatever else that there is going to be for you with the future episodes that you're going to be watching with the advanced scripting tutorial guide and also the GUI tutorial guide. So that is basically the entire beginner scripting tutorial guide. If you found this to be extremely helpful, then leaving a like on this video and also making a comment on like everything that you were able to do inside of this tutorial guide would definitely be very helpful. And I would love to see what you have to say about this tutorial guide. If there's anyone who you know would like to make Roblox games, then I encourage you to recommend them this tutorial guide as well for them to watch. And now that we've made it this far, I would like to say congratulations. This has been an extremely fun journey, and I would love to see what else that you'll be able to make beyond this point. But with that being said, that's basically going to conclude this tutorial guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.